Good afternoon, distinguished guests, partners, and colleagues. It's an honor to welcome all you to the third annual Unveil the Truth conference that become one of the flagship events for our community across Eastern Partnership countries and beyond. Each year, our conference brings together journalists, fact-checkers, researchers, and policymakers united by shared commitment to truth, transparency, and integrity of information. After 2 successful years hosting this event in Tbilisi, it's both meaningful and inspiring to welcome you here in Chisinau. Although circumstances required us to relocate, we are equally grateful for the opportunity to gather in a country that's shown remarkable determination on its European path. In these dynamic times, there is no better place to discuss the challenges and opportunities surrounding resilience against foreign information manipulation and the broader challenges to democracy in our region. Having taken place in both Georgia and Moldova, our conference reflects the shared aspirations and evolving journey of the Eastern Partnership countries. I sincerely hope that in the years ahead, we will continue to extend our reach even further. I would like to take this moment to express my gratitude to co-partner of our event, Deutsche Welle Academy, and other partners who made this event possible. Deutsche Welle Academy has supported Unveil the Truth since its very first edition, and we are deeply grateful for their continued trust and collaboration. As a fellow of the initiative Marianne for Human Rights Defender, I am also particularly touched by the strong engagement and support from our French partners, French Ministry for European and Foreign Affairs, represented by its embassy in Estonia and Moldova. We are equally grateful to our partners, Reporters Without Borders, CFI, and Stop False Moldova for their vital partnership. We are especially privileged to welcome Nina Jankovic, who will deliver today's keynote address on how to safeguard liberal order against disinformation, which is a threat for democracy. Over the next 2 days, around 50 speakers from 30 countries will address pressing issues surrounding FIMI and informational autocracy. Key discussions include how autocratic leaders weaponize information to preserve regimes, strategies for combating election-related disinformation, DSA enforcement for platform accountability, and other topics. Alongside panel discussions, the conference will feature interactive workshops showcasing the latest AI-powered and tech-driven research methodologies. I encourage all of you to engage fully in these discussions, share your expertise, and help us generate strategies that will allow us to move forward even in the face of these challenges. Thank you for being here and for standing with us in defense of truth and democracy. It's my great honor to present a video address now from Mrs. Isabelle Roms, Ambassador at Large for Human Rights in France. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to invite His Excellency Hubert Knirsch, Ambassador of Federal Republic of Germany to the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lomi Rom, dear Kalbatono Tamar, Mrs. Kintzerashvili, dear Miriam, most of all, dear participants from Eastern Partnership countries and from all across Europe. Welcome to Chisinau. The title of this event says very soberly conference, but when I look at the titles of the individual panels and workshops, I have the impression that this will be something more like a war council in the information war, a boot camp, an event that promises to be very practical, maybe technical to a certain extent. Let's not be afraid of it, but above all, a very political one. And one thing is sure, ladies and gentlemen, you have come to just the right place. Not so long ago, Moldova was considered, and there were studies to this effect, was considered one of the countries most vulnerable to FIMI, to information warfare. But just 5 weeks ago, Moldovan citizens successfully defended their democratic choice against an unprecedented, broad effort of interference, an effort that used vast resources and that used every method in the playbook and perhaps some new ones, from cyber attacks to very much illegal financing of political parties and outright vote buying. The success is the success of Moldovan citizens and Moldovan authorities who worked very hard. As international partners, we are proud that we were able to make some contribution to the preparation of these elections. One important fact is that media education has become part of the school curriculum in Moldova. This is not the case in many countries. Deutsche Welle Academy works here to strengthen the capacities of Moldovan schools, and the German Association of People's Universities does the same with regard to adult education. The Moldova School of Journalism is an innovation center of quality journalism. Good information these days is as precious as gold or more. Our lives depend on it. Everybody has to do their part. We all have to do our part in our own interest, in the interest of our societies, and actually for the sake of Europe. I wish you a very exciting and enriching conference. I'm very happy that a German and a French organization have partnered to organize it, and that our governments, Miriam, are supporting it. I wish you an exciting and enriching conference. I'm sure you will come back with added knowledge and inspiration, and with renewed strength and determination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Now let us welcome Ms. Miriam Gallant, Deputy Head of Mission at the Embassy of France to the Republic of Moldova.
Distinguished guests, dear Ambassador, dear participants, fight against FIMI has become one of the main challenges for democracy and indirectly to human rights. FIMI have long-term goals and objectives, but as Moldova and many other European countries experienced it lately, elections have become a critical moment when threats took new form and increased drastically. Cyber attacks, electoral corruption, information operation more and more sophisticated thanks to AI and social networks. In this context, it is time for democracies to face these challenges together and to open and reinforce new fields of cooperation. This is not only an institutional issue. The civil society and media engagement show us on a daily basis that this topic is a common concern. Fighting FEMI is everyone's responsibility and business, but the role of the states remains critical. In this context, at the end of October, at the Peace Forum in Paris, 29 states endorsed a political declaration reaffirming their commitment to strengthen multilateral cooperation for integrity of information and independent media, in the presence of President Macron and President Maya Sandu as well. In an international context where truth in the media is eroded and the information landscape saturated with disinformation, this text represents a collective response to attempts at polarization. Choosing Moldova for this conference today on this specific topic says a lot. It is more than a symbol. Moldova has a real experience to share with all of us in this field. For the last 2 years and for the past elections, this country did tremendous effort to fight these threats. Moldova has important lessons learned to share and successfully improve its institutions, procedures, internal cooperation, and international partnership with all partners. France stands beside Moldova and other partners to keep on working in this field. Operational cooperation to support the work done on short and long terms, to improve the approach by passing more and more from a reactive mode to a proactive promotion of common values, to increase support to independent media work, and to tirelessly underline the benefits of media education to reinforce the population resilience to FEMI, no matter where they are in Europe. With a strategy to combat disinformation, the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs has contributed to the training of over 2,000 journalists to better counter disinformation and information manipulation, and has supported the creation of 2 hubs in Paris and Bucharest, designed to host approximately 100 journalists in exile. Many thanks to Tamar for the organization of this conference. I wish you fruitful discussion and keep on working together to help European democracies in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, it is my greatest pleasure to invite Mr. Alan Dranick, Deputy Director General at CFI. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here with so many partners and colleagues working to strengthen the integrity of information. As you just heard, France is very committed to the fight against disinformation. CFI, which stands for Canal France International, tries to turn that commitment into reality. We are the media development organization of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also we are a member of the France Média Monde group, which includes France 24 and Radio France International. From Africa to Central Asia, in the Balkans, but more and more now in the Black Sea region, we try to support all those who keep information reliable, so fact-checkers, journalists, researchers, and civil society actors. We do this in many ways, by offering trainings, by supporting independent content production, and by promoting cooperation across borders and across continents. This conference perfectly reflects that spirit, as it is about exchanging good, bad practices across different countries and turning common problems into concrete solutions and common action. That's why we are very happy to support Myth Detector in the organization of this conference, and we look forward for the discussions ahead. But beyond this conference, our organization in the Black Sea region is doing its best to keep helping independent actors to grow stronger and better connected. So please allow me to take that opportunity to do some advertisements and to inform that we will be publishing call for proposals, offering opportunities to probably some of you here, to researchers, experts, journalists, media. If you're interested, you can just follow us on our social media, on our website. But among few initiatives, we will, for instance, support a study on information manipulation and interference in Moldova, Bulgaria, Romania, content production for Moldovan media outside of Chisinau, targeting linguistic minorities, peer-to-peer exchanges also between French journalists and Moldovan journalists on issues dealing with the climate and energy. We will propose also training modules on economic viability to Moldovan media. But also in Georgia and Armenia, we will keep supporting fact-checkers and independent newsrooms, especially ahead of next year's Armenian elections. And last but not least, also with our German colleagues from the Deutsche Welle Academy, we are exploring ways to keep supporting Ukrainian media in Ukraine. So, as it was said at the Paris Peace Forum last week, in the presence of President Macron, President Sandu, Prime Minister Ciolacu, disinformation was compared to a virus that endangers our democracies and must be fought firmly and with a collective response. So cooperation is clearly one of the best ways to build immunity. So thank you very much for being here and for being part of that collective answer.
Now, please welcome Dr. Catherine Wary, Program Director for Georgia at Deutsche Welle Academy.
Thank you, and a warm welcome to everyone. I'm delighted to see so many people who are interested in our conference and feel responsible for responding to disinformation. I would like to express my special thanks to our supporters and donors, the German Embassy in Moldova and Georgia, the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, and the embassies in Moldova and Estonia from France, as well as Reporters Without Borders and CFI Media Development. Without your help, this conference would not have been possible. In addition, I would like to express my special thanks to MDF, Tamar, and all the outstanding, dedicated staff. Wow, you really have given your all. Thank you very much. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the experts for contributing their knowledge and commitment here. That is exactly what we need, experts who are committed to their cause. We live in a rapidly changing environment that poses new threats every day through disinformation and propaganda. I'm referring, of course, to Georgia, but also to Moldova, the surrounding countries, and even countries such as Germany, my home country, where disinformation and its effects are growing fast. We must counter this, and to do so, we need awareness, we need exchange, and we need coherence. As the last speaker here, for the opening, I would like to encourage us not to lose time by doing just talking. Let us enjoy the panels and workshops. find new information and inspiration. Let us use the time to get to know new fact-checkers and plan future cooperations. And last but not least, let us continue to find our own truths and narratives that we can use to attack FIMI. Thanks a lot.
Thank you to all our distinguished guests. And now, personally, it is my personal pleasure to be the person who will be introducing our keynote speaker, award-winning author, CEO of American Sunlight Project, expert on disinformation, Ms. Nina Jankovic, please.
Good morning, or I guess afternoon, everyone. Let me find a place for my water so it doesn't splash. Okay, I'm delighted to be in Chisinau with all of you today, surrounded by so many friends at what is unfortunately a dark moment for our field. And though we're all missing Khachapuri and Hinkali this week, being in Moldova for this year's conference feels auspicious for our community. Because as we've heard already today, just a few weeks ago, Moldova did something remarkable. After months, if not years, of speculation about whether Moldova could withstand Kremlin pressure and stay the course of European integration, after Moscow spent hundreds of millions of euros to influence the outcome of the EU referendum and presidential and parliamentary elections with vote buying and influence campaigns, after Russia paid propagandists to establish a network of over 90 TikTok accounts that posted thousands of videos totaling more than 23 million views and 860,000 likes since January, Moldova stood strong in each of 3 votes, rejecting the division, hatred, and lies that the Kremlin put so much money and so many resources behind. Moldova chose democracy, Moldova chose freedom, and Moldova chose truth. But Moldova's choice was not a miracle. Moldovans chose democracy because many people, some of whom are in this room, worked to protect reality, worked to protect democratic rights. They did it despite being up against a formidable enemy with deep pockets at a time when doing the work of safeguarding democracy against disinformation is, to put it frankly, not very sexy. It's more than that, though. Doing this work can put us in grave danger. Our Georgian colleagues, of course, know this intimately. The organizers of today's event, the Media Development Foundation, have been targeted by the Georgian government for their work unmasking disinformation and documenting democratic backsliding. They have received letters from the so-called Anti-Corruption Bureau accusing them of being in violation of the Foreign Agents Law, a tactic we first saw pioneered in Russia. Their headquarters was graffitied by masked men with the words, "Pseudo-liberal fascists, slaves work here." Staff and their family members have been harassed for their affiliation with the group. More than that, a year ago, 2 Georgian employees of the US-based Atlantic Council, Eto Buziashvili and Sopo Galava, both had their homes raided by the Georgian financial police. They had their computers seized and assets frozen. They had to leave their home country. Make no mistake, these are attempts at intimidation. They are attempts to silence these brave researchers who are holding the government of Bidzina Ivanishvili to account. And although we could not meet in Georgia this year, I am so personally inspired that Tamar and her team at MDF, that Eto and Sopo, that all of the Georgian civil society activists who have been targeted continue their work despite the costs it has imposed. These are costs that I know personally too. As some of you may know, in 2022, I was appointed to lead the Disinformation Governance Board, a policy-making body within the US Department of Homeland Security that was supposed to coordinate responses to disinformation while ensuring protection for American civil rights, civil liberties, privacy, and freedom of expression. Predictably, the MAGA movement went nuts when my appointment was announced. They claimed the board was a censorship body and that I was, according to Tucker Carlson, going to have the power to send men with guns to the homes of Americans with whom I disagreed. These were outright lies, but they were testing out an autocratic playbook, one that has plenty in common with what our Georgian colleagues have experienced. And that playbook, unfortunately, was proven to work. These censorship allegations made the base angry, so angry that they doxed me and threatened me and said I was committing treason against the United States. Treason, of course, is punishable by death. I was about 36 weeks pregnant at the time. I made the decision to leave government because the Biden administration didn't seem willing to defend the critical work of countering disinformation, and they didn't seem willing to defend me. The administration made a critical error that has caused grave harm to our community. Since then, because the administration rolled over, because that playbook worked, the US government has unilaterally disarmed in the fight against falsehoods, shutting down government agencies dedicated to the challenge, and halting the funding of the good work that many of you in this room have done and continue to do. And you haven't just lost funding. Many of you who work on disinformation have also been labeled censors and been threatened, harassed, and investigated, like Tamar, like Eto, and like me. My own personal challenges as a result of these lies continue to this day. I found out just before the Trump administration came into office, about this time last year, that Kash Patel made an enemies list, and I'm one of the 60 people on it. Kash Patel, of course, is now the nation's top cop, leading the FBI. In January, my family moved to What disinformation researchers in the United States and Georgia have been fighting against, this autocratic campaign that has labeled our crucial public interest research and advocacy and fact-checking as treasonous or fascist, is now being broadly exported all over Europe and the world. The Trump administration has aligned itself with social media platforms who have decried as censorship the valuable fact-checking work you all have done for years. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced he will issue visa bans for anyone involved in this alleged scheme and instructed his diplomats to lobby against the EU's Digital Services Act. What has happened in Georgia is just the beginning. The autocratic Ivanishvili regime has been testing the waters with a US administration that turns a blind eye to restrictions on free expression. Autocrats around the world are now employing the same playbook, sometimes with the explicit support of Trump-aligned American NGOs and the administration itself. Unfortunately, that permission structure is only becoming stronger the longer the Trump administration is in office. And while the administration and its allies might want our community of fact-checkers and researchers and civil society advocates to look the other way, to forget that informational threats to our democracies and our collective security exist, we know they continue. Our strategic adversaries continue to actively exploit deepening fissures in our societies in order to amplify discord and polarization. While social media companies have rolled back their efforts to address disinformation on their platforms and restricted access to their data, making it difficult to hold them account, government and public sector responses to foreign disinformation have been derided and dismantled, and our adversaries have taken note. The Kremlin continues to weaponize homegrown discontent in order to achieve its foreign policy goals and weaken our collective security and our shared reality. In the past year, my team at the American Sunlight Project identified evidence of continued coordinated pro-Russian actions undermining democracy. We found a network of several hundred X accounts that we've called EcoBoost, which spam environmental and tech conversations on X at a mass scale. Using hot-button topics like environmental and tech policy, the network attempts to undermine trust in left-leaning movements and pit our citizens against one another by polarizing conversations. My team has also looked at the way that AI is changing how our adversaries spread disinformation. Back in February, ASP researchers discovered that a collection of several hundred pro-Russia content aggregation sites, known as the Pravda network, are pumping out at least 3.6 million articles per year in order to groom large language models into spitting out pro-Russian propaganda. Since then, several other research organizations, some of whom are in this room today, have confirmed that Pravda network content was being cited by major AI chatbots in support of pro-Russia narratives that are provably false. It has even made its way into Wikipedia citations. There are plenty more examples of foreign information manipulation and interference that organizations in this room have discovered and cataloged. All of these case studies show that Russia, along with China, Iran, and many other autocracies and mixed regimes, are still active in undermining social cohesion and truth in democracies. They're taking advantage of the lack of political will at platforms to address disinformation and taking advantage of a geopolitical environment that is growing more favorable to it. So why then? Why have we seen such a rollback in the support for our public interest research? It's because we've made autocrats and oligarchs more vulnerable. We have endangered the structures that have made them rich and powerful. Our research has proven time and time again that the most enraging content online is the most engaging content. That is the content that shores up support for the likes of Putin and Trump and Orban and Ivanishvili, and the content that makes billions of dollars for Musk and Zuckerberg. That's why these men, these broligarchs, as Carol Cadwalader calls them, want nothing more than for us to self-censor, to self-police, to self-select out of the work we are doing in service of the public, in service of democracy, in service of a shared reality. But my friends, I am here to tell you, we need to do the opposite. This is the moment that it's more important than ever to stay in this fight. I've been to a lot of events over the past few months wondering where our field goes next. How can we avoid scrutiny? How do we reinvent ourselves? How do we stay alive? Where do we go wrong? Listen to me. If you remember one thing from my speech today, let it be this. We do not need to reinvent ourselves. We did not do anything wrong. The liars of this world have spent so much time and money attacking us precisely because what we are doing is working, because we represent a formidable challenge to their power and profit. They cut off our access to data because they were worried that our findings would undermine them. They are using the legal system to keep us preoccupied and scared, to distract us from our work. They are trying to delegitimize us through alliances with unscrupulous politicians and media organizations. They have defunded and decried fact-checkers because the facts aren't on their side. They are threatening us because we are a threat to them. So we need to keep fighting. We can't twist ourselves into knots trying to describe our work in ways they might find acceptable. If we do, we will always be reinventing, rebranding in ways that keep us from connecting with the public that we are trying to support. We can't bury our heads in the sand and hope to resurface when all of this is over. If we do, when we do, there might not be anything left to fight for. The fight is now. As Tamar Kinsurashvili recently said, now is not the time to abandon our dreams about the future of our countries, whether that be Georgia, Moldova, other countries in the Eastern Partnership, or even in Western Europe or the United States. In addition to recommitting to our work, there's something really important that we need to prioritize if we're going to make it through this difficult time, if we're going to safeguard democracy against disinformation. We need to focus on the big picture. We need to put aside differences we may have with one another and come together in support of something we may all take for granted, our belief in democracy. Now is not the time to debate the perfect definition of disinformation or to harbor bad blood because 5 years ago another organization got a grant that you think you should have been awarded. We need to all recognize that we're on the same team and that we need to be here to lift one another up. One of the worst things about my experience has been how isolated I sometimes felt from this community. Early on, people were scared to speak out and defend me and my work. Maybe they didn't want to take the risk of being associated with me. Maybe they were happy to see me go down. There was even someone who published an essay asserting essentially that I got what I deserved. Needless to say, this sort of infighting doesn't help our cause, neither does silence. It gives fodder to the liars, to the people who threaten us. To this day, some people are still scared to be on email chains with me, to be at events with me, to collaborate with me and my organization. Donors are afraid to fund us and be associated with us. And the same is true for so many organizations that have been attacked in the same way that I have. But if we know that there's one thing the autocrats of the world are good at, it's weaponizing division. Let's not give them any to use against the counter-disinformation and fact-checking community. Let's speak with one voice and defend those who are being attacked. Let's loudly and clearly and proactively explain who we are and what we're about. Let's not just say it, let's show it. Let's coordinate and cooperate with those who have been attacked, even when it might be risky or uncomfortable. We are much stronger together than when we are standing alone. And that goes for the donor community too. Now is the time to stand by the values that you have invested in building around the world, to stand by your old partners and make new ones, even when the going gets tough. Our organizations might need a little more flexibility in the years to come as we work to survive this moment. We might have to stray a little bit from our carefully crafted theories of change while we fight to survive. We might need more core funding, more emergency funding as we deal with lawsuits and harassment. Yes, our work has been politicized. Our work has been made more risky, but it is more important than ever. And we need to defend it from the burgeoning movement of Western autocrats, the same way we have defended it from Putin and his friends. I know that simply existing in this field has become exhausting for everyone. And there are some days when we ask ourselves whether it's worth it at all. I know I do. But that's when I come back to an essay I read in graduate school when I was studying social movements in Central and Eastern Europe. It's an essay many of you probably hold dear as well, The Power of the Powerless by Václav Havel. In it, Havel describes a greengrocer who one day refuses to hang party propaganda in his shop window, providing the pretext for others to pierce the communist regime's stronghold on society. He writes, "The greengrocer has not committed a simple individual offense isolated in its own uniqueness, but something incomparably more serious. By breaking the rules of the game, he has disrupted the game as such. He has exposed it as a mere game. He has shattered the world of appearances, the fundamental pillar of the system. He has upset the power structure by tearing apart what holds it together. He has demonstrated that living a lie is living a lie." Every day, through our research, our advocacy, we are doing that very same work. But we're already in a better position than that greengrocer, acting alone in the hopes of inspiring others. We have a community here in this room, thousands more across the world, who have shown over and over again how those who traffic in disinformation, be they in Moscow, Tbilisi, Beijing, Silicon Valley, Washington, wherever, they are playing a game, and they are doing it with a weaker hand. They are living a lie, and we are refusing to. So, my friends, send the tweet. Use that disfavored word, read a banned book, publish your paper, expose those liars and megalomaniacs profiting from online harms and disinformation for exactly who they are. Keep on fighting. Thank you. I think we don't have time for questions, but I'll be around, so please do talk to me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very powerful and inspiring speech. Now it's time to move to the panel session. We will be hearing on combating foreign information manipulation and interference and election-related disinformation. The panel is moderated by registrant, and I ask moderator and the panel participants up on the stage, please.
Are we ready? Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be in Chisinau today to moderate this panel. I would have loved as well to be in Tbilisi, the city where I used to live for 24 years. I just left. And, but Chisinau is always a fascinating place, very interesting. I'm coming here since 24 years, I think. And it is a kind of laboratory of what's going on in the post-Soviet area, unfortunately, I would say. But it is a real place where you can really observe what's going on. So it's important. It's always also important for us to compare the Soviet republics and to try to see what are the dynamics, the role of oligarchs, the role of disinformation, the role of Russia, and so on and so on. We have just 1 hour, five finally panelists. So maybe you have 7-8 minutes each now, and we'll try to keep some time for at the end for some questions from the audience. You see the topic, of course, I need less to underline how important it is. What I would love to, just before, and I won't speak much because I will give the floor to our panelists, is I feel what is important these last 2 years, I would say, is that how people in Europe just became really conscious about the importance of this topic. And I was a few weeks ago at another conference. I'm not going so much to the conferences, but I was in Toulon, in the south of France, which is, Toulon is the most important military port in France, very strategic. And we had a great panel with the 3 chiefs of the 3 armies of France. And when they were asked what is now the main threat, of course, they say it's Russia. It's clearly identified as it was never before in France, for example, clearly. And saying that we have to be ready to strike first, even. So it was really straightforward message and an understanding of the situation. But when we ask them to identify how they see the threats, what are the main threats, of course, they say first it could be an aggression, maybe not directly against France, the French territory, I would say, but against one of the NATO members, for example. But the second threat that they immediately identified was the hybrid warfare, the disinformation. And these people are more dealing with tanks, with missiles, with aircraft. So just to say how important is the topic and how it is now seen as a very prior issue and threat perceived by, for example, the French military leadership. So we have just 5 panelists. Who is missing? Chiara, you're here. Chiara Passenti, which is a data analyst for the European External Action Service of so the EU, especially you focus a lot on the FIMI. So this is what we'll speak about. We will, with our panelists, we will have both the description and the prescription, I would say, of our topic. It's a huge topic. So Jurgis Norvaisa, from the NATO Strategic Communication Center of Excellence. Elena Calistru from Bucharest, which is the chair of the Funky Citizen NGO. So it's very important year for you because of what happened in Romania last year and in Moldova this year. So we'll be really talking about what's going on here. Denis Chenusha, well-known political analyst who is also focusing a lot on this issue, and Olena Shuranova from Ukraine, fact checker, editor of Stop Fake. Maybe I will start with Denis because I want to go first on the description of the dynamics of the disinformation, especially coming from Russia. So would you a little bit describe what you observe, how you frame the kind of interference that we observe now?
Does it work? Does it work? Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to be at home. Normally, I am traveling somewhere across Europe, so finally I'm back home after important elections. As it was already mentioned many times, Moldova has shown a good performance in countering disinformation. Do you? Okay, oh, closer. Okay. I'm happy to be back home. That was my first message. I'm originally from Moldova. I have been following very closely the situation at home and the fact that Moldova has been supported very much by the EU partners, and we have to acknowledge that. I believe that without this support, probably Moldova would have shown different electoral results. But we are here to talk about a bigger phenomenon and to talk about FIMI as part of the main challenges against the integrity of the elections and in general the external factor and in which direction the country is moving as a result of the elections if they are successfully targeted by FIMI. So I have been reflecting a little bit how we could look at this phenomenon because it's really enormous. We can look at this in different ways, but I decided to have 3 dimensions that I would like to shed a little bit of light together with you. So the first dimension, which in my view is very much present, and I think it will be part of the game, as we see that the countries, those which are under direct threat, military threat from Russia, or those like Ukraine, or those that are facing crisis situations, they are dealing with issues of good governance or governance in general. What we can observe as being a more and more preferable tool for Russia is to combine the conspiracy theories, which were already mentioned by Nina, as well as the exaggeration of the mistakes that were made by the governments, mismanagement, certain crises that take place because of different issues that usually are endemic or sometimes are internally produced as a result of, I don't know, structural issues such as corruption, which is still something that the governments, even those that are EU candidate states like Moldova, are trying to counter. So I think that what we could see as a clear evidence that Russia is studying us very closely and very carefully and is striking when we are not ready or when we are trying to hide certain crises instead of dealing with them. And I believe that or miscommunicating on certain issues, especially when we talk about public money and how we spend them. And I can give 2 examples because I was trying to look into what is happening in Eastern Europe, but also what we see in the EU, within the EU, and 2 issues related to this mixture of sourcing that Russia is using, conspiracy theories and exaggeration. And I can give you 2 examples. I think that you know about that, especially those who are working in the field. So it's about how Russia is interpreting the investment that Moldova is conducting in the field of defense. Which Russia is interpreting as militarization of Moldova against Ukraine, or in order to use it against Ukraine, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, this is actually a way for Moldova to invest in its own security. But as long as Moldova is not able to properly communicate about why it's using this money, then obviously there is a little bit of space for Russia to interpret it and to put the word in the mouth of people before the government is doing so. So here comes, I think, that the issue of strategic communication is something that even the current government, the recently appointed government, has mentioned as one of the strategies, by the way. And the other example, which I also found very interesting, is the case of Germany. And you remember very well the discussion, the very effervescent discussion about migration and the fact that immigrants are becoming a threat for the public order. And this is one of the main arguments that were used by AfD during the recent elections, when they have been exploiting these car attacks that were conducted by, or that involved certain immigrants with certain mental issues, but that happened. And we had people that suffered because of these attacks. And again, if the German government in this case is not communicating properly about the migration policy, then when a crisis happens, like a car that is crashing into the crowds at the Christmas markets, then it will become a source for Russian inspiration, which will obviously support far-right forces in a country that is, until now, was very well established within NATO and within the EU. Still the polarization, which was already mentioned several times, is going to be used when a crisis like that happens. Now I will move quickly to the other two dimensions because I think I'm taking too much of time. But the second dimension, which is also very, very visible, is the exploitation of the domestic actors, political actors. It is not always the case of opposition, which sometimes can be Eurosceptic or can be openly pro-Russian. It's also the case of Georgia, where you have a government that is openly copy-pasting and following certain narratives that Russia is supporting or is inspiring Russian narratives, which is also the case. We should not always look. I think that there is a tendency to look at what Russia is saying, but I believe that there are many times when actually some autocratic or governments that are moving towards autocracy, they are also inspiring Russia and is giving its source of food for thought. And I think that this is also something that we have to look carefully at. But when I speak about opposition, this is a more interesting situation because we have cases like Romania. I told you that I'm going to bring different cases so that it's not only about Eastern Europe. We have cases like Romania where you have very strong opposition, and we speak about currently the most important political party in Romania, which is our, right? Is the Alliance of the Union of Romanians, which is using the discontent of the population with the way, I don't know, again, how the public money is used. And in my view, we have to find a way. I know that Nina said that we have to not reinvent ourselves, but I think that we have to look at how we can speak about unpleasant and very tricky, sensitive issues in a way that we engage with those that are against the pro-EU forces, against certain things that are supported, backed by the EU, be it migration or investing in European defense, investing in drone wall, and all these initiatives that are very important for the security, but I think that they are not communicated in such a way that we have this buying in of the support that is coming from the other side of the camps, because at the moment we are also in different camps and we are not listening to each other sometimes. And then the last point that I would like to mention is about the EU and how the EU is targeted on constant basis. And I think that our colleagues from the institutions and they are working on this more closely. I also do job on this, but I would like to just mention that while the EU is investing money, is investing support, is trying to build this resilience in the EU member states as well as in the EU candidate states, and Moldova is one of them. I think that the EU is also attracting a lot of attention from Russia and is becoming actually one of the targets that Russia is trying to attack again and again in order to reduce the credibility of the EU. At the moment, the EU is one of the biggest safeguard mechanisms for all these pro-EU governments and non-state actors like civil society organizations and media institutions that are trying to engage and to support the governments in fighting disinformation. The EU is doing this sometimes difficult job of sharing its credibility towards everybody with which it works. But at the same time, we have to understand whether the EU is really capable to renew its capital of credibility. Because at the moment, I will repeat myself, the EU has to also learn to speak in a strategic way, to do a strategic communication, which doesn't mean propaganda. Is to be careful about that, which means to be very careful with numbers, explaining which are the costs and benefits, and showing results for every initiative that it is conducting. Because if the EU is not doing this communication, then again it will be Russia that will replace the EU and will try to introduce to implant these prejudices. Because the moment when we don't deal with certain narratives at the right moment, they become prejudices. And if something becomes a prejudice, it's almost impossible to unroot it. It will take much more resources, and it will become literally a long game to deal with this narrative that became literally part of these worldviews, like truths that are almost difficult to combat. And here I will stop.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Denis, very much. As you spoke about Europe, I would maybe pass the floor to Chiara to tell us about the trends, the new trends you observe in the FIMI at the European scale, I would say. Please.
Thank you. Okay. Hi everyone, thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I work, said, at the European External Action Service in the Information Strategy and Countering FIMI division. Specifically, in my team, we work with data, so I work with a team that tries to analyze FIMI, conceptualize it, and trying to understand what here we are talking about, and also to provide data to then do what we call strategic communication. Since we're talking here about elections in this panel, I would like to start with a very basic concept, like the way we really see it and the perspective that we are taking, at least from my team perspective, is a security perspective. For us, FIMI is a security threat. And in this way, we also develop, our methodology to understand it as it is. And we know that elections are events which, of course, trigger these FIMI attacks. They, and both, from a perspective of the security of the information space, but also speaking a bit more on sort of the hybrid dimension. This is an event that, of course, is a catalyst of FIMI, specifically when it comes to Russian activities. Since, of course, in my team we have the mandate to look at specifically Russian activities, we see that these are really strategic events, and we see it cross-country. Of course, this is just, this is not just in the EU neighborhood, you have accession country, we also see it in countries inside the European Union, and we know that the strategic objectives of Russia are, of course, destabilization ones, both from, the perspective of sort of invalidating any type of political force that goes against the will, but also in terms of destabilizing the society itself. I will just speak maybe of trends in the past 2 weeks, because we can talk a lot, about Moldova, we can talk about Georgia. So what happened in the past 2 weeks in elections? So a lot already. We had, for instance, the strategic redirection of certain networks from targeting Moldova to targeting Armenia. We are seeing that these networks are actively shifting their assets to target the ruling party, to target political figures. And this is very interesting because we already know the playbook that happened in Moldova. We can know, for example, what can happen next there. We have seen in Czechia, for example, there were Russian state-linked media project, which will resonate with some of you, Global Fact-Checking Network, that pretends to be a fact-checking initiative, very, very independent, but was trying to shed light on alleged election frauds. And this was done with fabricated investigations into the interference of the Czech administration in matters related to buying votes, which is really interesting. And on the other hand, maybe we can change continent. Last 2 weeks, Ivory Coast. We have seen Russia activated a broad spectrum of local channels to interfere in the elections. They were amplifying local claims that were aligned with Russia and specifically inserting content in certain local networks. So this is just to say, these were the past 2 weeks. But this is an ongoing effort, of course. Elections, as said, are of strategic importance. And over the time that, at least I can recall, from past investigations while doing this job, it follows a very simple but very effective pattern. It normally starts, the playbook normally starts with preparing the information space to the creation of dedicated online assets. Then this online asset starts engaging with local information environment. And as the election approaches, we see increasing attacks towards candidates, towards institutions, up until and all the way up until real-life threats and fabricated claims of, for example, I don't know, hybrid threats or bomb attacks in certain parts of the country while the vote is taking place. All these to create insecurity, basically. And then after the elections, we see fabricated claims of election interference or rigged votes. This is a playbook that we know very well. We know they reproduce it and they reshuffle it according to the strategic importance that that election has for Russia. So what? So what do we do from there? I will not take too much time because I've spoken already a bit too much, but panelists before me already said that cross-sector cooperation is our stronger asset. Nina said it before, it's not easy to do this job for organizations and institutions alike when you try to actually make your voice heard and stand for integrity in the information space. Cross-sector cooperation proves to be really our stronger assets. And we are not gonna use the same system as our adversaries. Sometimes we feel that they are always one step ahead of us, but of course this is because they don't have the privilege of having accountability, which is something that we can count on, at least on our end. And just to finalize, maybe we know that this cross-sector cooperation works, and the case of Moldova was a successful one, indeed, when speaking about that. And thank you very much. I will end to the other.
Thank you very much. Indeed, when I was coming, since now 20 years in Moldova, I was always impressed by the scale, the number of tools which are used in this country by Russia. It targets everything, the church, the medias, the political parties, the breakaway regions, and so on and so on. And sometimes some observers, maybe not specialists with the region, would say, you know, it's Moldova or Georgia or Armenia are not so important. They are small countries and so on. But when you see, when you observe how many tools are deployed in these countries, it shows a lot about how Russia how it is important for Russia. It reminds me that there is one man that I, from time to time, listening to the videos. There is one interview and one conference from 1983 from Yuri Bezmenov. He used to be KGB agent, and he already explained at the time in 83, so it's like 40 years ago, that 15% of the KGB work is only about operation. 85% is about hybrid warfare, disinformation, and so on, and with the idea of destabilize the enemy, the West, through this means. So it means it's something very deep. It's not coming. It's not a new tool at all. Maybe I will give the floor to Elena, because to go to some concrete examples, local ones, as we speak about Moldova. If you could tell us how you've seen or what you observe with the elections in Romania and in Moldova, and maybe also, because we're in observation, prescription, maybe also which tools could be improved at the moment. 7 minutes.
Maybe this is the only one that works. Good afternoon. How are you? All good? Why do we seem so dark and gloomy? Because I came here to say that while we went through a near-death experience, or in terms of democracy, a near-death experience with the elections in Romania, I think we still have some reasons to hope. And I think it's not just the case of my country. I think it's also the case of Moldova. And when I'm in such context, I'm usually looking around, and I have an issue with us seeming defeated somehow, while we're not there. I mean, I think we're still alive and kicking, and I think that while what we've learned through our experience is that Indeed, it is not only about the countries that are not in the EU, and of course, while countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova are at the front lines of this war, not only the spillover effects, but the, let's say, replication of some of the tactics and strategies in countries like Romania, but I would say that also, for example, in Eastern Germany, the replication is quite visible. My organization had the chance to, work with an instrument like the DSA. I think that right now we are the most experienced organization, not because we're the best one, but because we had so many elections. So we had the chance to work with the instruments we have at our disposal right now in cooperation with partners in Moldova back in October 2024, and then in the Romanian elections, and then again in the new Romanian elections in May, and then again in Moldova now in November. And what we've learned is that indeed, Moldova seems to be a bit of a testing ground, probably because it's smaller and it's easier to test, and probably also cheaper to test some tactics. For example, the use of micro-influencers, these payments, the micro payments for such influencers, the exploitation of some of the algorithms, like the one of TikTok and the organization on Telegram, as well as the boosting of some topics which are definitely going against the European Union as a main target for some of these campaigns. And I think that what we've learned is that perhaps we should pay more attention to what is happening in these countries which are at the forefront of the fight. I think we were a bit, and we were discussing this on our way from the airport, I think that we were a bit arrogant, thinking that, well, it did happen in Moldova, it was so complicated and so tough, but it cannot happen in an EU country. Well, guess what? It can happen in an EU country, and I think it can have even worse effects in an EU country.
I just wanted to underline it even happened in the US.
Yes, though I would say, yeah, about that. Anyways, I think it's becoming, of course, in my view, it's quite obvious that we are in a new Cold War. And I think it's quite obvious that we're talking about a clash of civilizations, or at least a culture where that has as a prize our democracy and the liberal democracy. For me, it's clear that while we might talk about events like elections, which are of course boosting everything that we are seeing, these attacks are built in time, and they are built also on pre-existing conditions. If you want, they're like a virus. It hits you quite badly, even if you're healthy. But if you have a pre-existing condition, it can actually lead to near-death experiences. So what I would say is that while we need to learn from what is happening in these countries, I think that we also need to acknowledge the fact that we are not so well prepared, because we thought that it cannot get that bad. I think we don't have the level of sophistication we have seen here in terms of reactions. I am a huge fan of what the colleagues from Ukraine have done, because they've actually started building since 2014 a lot, and I think that one of the reasons for which they actually have, this resilience that we keep on quoting, is that it's not just fact checking; it's also media literacy and so on and so forth. So it's also perhaps strategic communication and so on. And The last thing I would say is that while you'll have another debate, another panel which will be dedicated entirely to DSA, I would say that in my view, we need to invest more in making this tool more effective. I would love for the European Union to be stronger when it comes to dealing with a large tech platform. But unfortunately, I think that the EU institutions are doing the best that they can right now. It's part of a larger negotiation. It's part of a larger pressure. I've seen this directly in the US in September when almost all US officials we have met were quoting the DSA as being this like huge evil. But in my line of business, when something gets attacked, like fact checkers, like the DSA, I think that's proof of impact. And it's proof that that tool is actually bothering some of the nasty guys that are trying to hurt our democracies. So that would be my prescriptive part of the intervention. Let's make sure that the instruments we have are used as much as possible. And I would say that while the EU deserves its good chunk of criticism, at the same time, it also deserves an even larger chunk of support for some of these instruments. Because, yeah, I also think that it's one of the last actors standing for some of the values we all believe in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I will ask you, Elena, now to take the floor and to give us what you see from Ukraine in the context of the war. And with your organization, Stop Fake. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here at Eastern Partnership Fact Checkers Conference, or should I call it a conference of countries who are lucky to be neighbors with Russia. Yeah, I'm from Stop Fake, and we're working with all this lies. When we start in 2014 work with that, we called it lie. Then we start to use this term disinformation broadly, and now we start using this term like FIMI. But anyway, the problem is still here. And if my colleagues talking about near death experience, unfortunately, I could just talk about actual death experience every day, because I came from Kiev. I'm not living on near a front line, but anyway, even in Kiev, to walk there and to fact check all this Russian disinformation, also very dangerous. And it's hard because, for example, right now we have no much electricity, and we also have to handle this right away. But anyway, turn into elections, turn into FIMI. Actually, I will be really happy to talk about elections in Ukraine. I'm the luckiest person ever, because if we will have election in Ukraine, so it will mean that the war is over and we could handle with all this peaceful stuff and not with all these war issues. But we, for objective reasons, we couldn't have elections right now. But anyway, we have a lot of narratives that Russia spread about election in Ukraine, and I think everyone hear about all these narratives about illegitimate power in Ukraine, about illegitimate president, and even Russian media, they even stop calling our president as a president even anymore, or our parliament as a power anymore. They like just pretending that it's just some guy, some junta who took power illegally. And organizing all this war initially from our side, allegedly. But also, every election in each European country also a very main topic in our information space among Ukrainians. Because, of course, and it's also concern. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired. every election in each European country, especially when it's country partner of Ukraine, share our values, help us a lot, and all these results of this election are very important for Ukraine. And of course, Russia understands that, and they are trying to not just work in that countries, but work with Ukrainian population and to share a lot of narratives that could you see that there is a chaos in other European countries, that there is no democratic elections instead of Russia, where everything is so democratic and beautiful. For example, and also Ukrainians are really monitoring everything that is happening with election in other countries who are partners of Ukraine. And even when election in Moldova finished, we have on the next day, we were very happy with the results. And we even share a picture among all our friends that somebody is looking at a newspaper and saying, oh, thanks God, one less fucking neighbor around us. So we were really happy about these results, and these results and democratic elections in other country means for us a lot, because democratic elections means continuing support for Ukraine and continuing chances for our victory in this war. Yeah, I'm sorry for mixed words here because.
So what you say basically is that the Russians are also really using the elections that happen in the countries which are partnering with Ukraine, as I don't know, the Western countries and so on, to really to one of the targets of the Russian propaganda, let's say, in Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely.
Specifically.
Yeah, absolutely, and like. They use the main sources where disinformation spread in Ukraine, and sources that Ukrainians use as a media and the channels to get news, and it's Telegram, TikTok. And we, during each elections in each country, we saw like a spread of different fakes about a candidate who share pro-European values, and we saw like a huge amount of different fakes in Russian and Ukrainian language. So they spread all these lies about among our population as well. And they all, of course, also they trying to demoralize with all these narratives Ukrainians, and demoralization is also really serious issues right now, because it's hard to be resilient for 12 years already. So also it's also the other topic that they used to fight in this war.
So indeed, the key word is the demoralization. I guess it's really, and I guess also the propaganda on Trump, on what Trump is trying to do to achieve, is also, I guess, of course, extremely important. Thank you very much. And we will end this panel with Georgis, it's a kind of opportunity to sum up all what we said with this recent report released by the NATO Center of Excellence on Russia. Sorry, I lost my the collage of the Kremlin's communication strategy. So, would you sum up what is in this report? What it says about the last trends?
I have hello, good afternoon, everyone. I have few slides. As a military, I am trained to prepare some slides, so if it's possible, I just want to show them. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so first of all, once again, good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to participate here in this event, and I am presenting NATO's Strategic Communication Center of Excellence, which is in Riga, Latvia. And yeah, it was some kind of coincidence. We published this report last week on the 5th of November, and on the 4th of November, Russia is celebrating Day of Unity, which is in the hierarchy of celebrations, the second most important event after the День Победы. And another important, and especially for me as a Lithuanian, fact is that the Day of Unity, why we're celebrating that day. It commemorates the events which took place in 1612, when Polish and Lithuanian forces were occupied Moscow, and we're celebrating uprising and the event how they went through from those events. So it means, for me, it commemorates what even small countries and small nations as Lithuania, when they're united with some other powers, they can have some victories and they can create some dilemmas for Russia. But let's switch to our latest report from NATO Stratcom COE. And we started this series of reports about Russia's communication strategy to support military actions in Ukraine just after the full-scale invasion into the Ukraine. So it started 2022, and this report is the third iteration of our reports. So the main idea of those reports was to understand, is it possible to define what Russia is planning to do from their communication. And from the first report, it was clear there is no evidence and there is no possibility to understand Russia's actions from the communication, because the communication changed just a few days before the full-scale invasion to Ukraine. But knowing what we have limited time, I'll switch to our this year report. So the scope of the report, I'm sorry for this part of participants. So the scope of the report, we were analyzing three main sources of information. One of the sources is Russian official communication. So we were analyzing 6 Russia's governmental regulatory institutions, so it's presidential institutions, State Duma, Federal Council, Security Council, and 2 ministries, Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And of course for us, the main or the most interesting source of information from governmental institutions was Ministry of Defense, because it's the main communicator about the war in Ukraine. Another portion of information we were analyzing, it was from Telegram channels. So we were analyzing more than 300 Telegram channels, and those Telegram channels were focused on 3 main target audiences. It was Ukrainian, it was Baltics, and it was Russia itself. And the third part of information we analyzed, it was 2 weekly TV shows. One of them was Воскресное время on Первый канал, and second one, it was a weekly show Вести недели on Россия Первый канал. Okay, and let's go to the findings. So let's go to the thoughts which came from that report. So we named the report Collage of Lies, because it tells us how Russia's communication is created and how it works, let's call it like that. So I think the best way to explain it is like some kind of analogy, and I would take an example like, for example, music festival. So you have music festival, you have different stages in which you have maybe even different groups, but the topic of this festival and the theme is the same. So it means, despite the fact that information which flows from TV, which flows from Telegram, or which flows from official communication, it might be different, it might be orchestrated in different way, but the main idea why it is created, it's the same, because it should serve for Russia's strategic goals. And another interesting example, which also illustrates this collage of lies, I found this on TikTok, and it was like video which said, okay, it's FSB lesson how to control the society. And it was explained like that. If we have a person, and this person can choose between lies and truth, so he or she can choose, one or another side. But in Russia, everything is created a bit in a different way. You need to divide those lies into few parts and to put person not in between the truth and lies, but in between different lies. So it means the person cannot choose what is reality, what is not, because all the time he or she is in between the lies. So this collage depicts the reality in Russia. So despite the fact which source of information person is using in Russia, all the time he or she is in some kind of different lies. And due to limited time, I would like to stop as well on that picture. So it depicts some insight from official communication. And the idea is that Russia's society, as we know, is some kind of addicted to the information. What does it mean? We analyzed the Ministries of Defense communication, and it's shown for us that only 20% of the main communicator about the war in Ukraine is about the war in Ukraine. 80% of the communication of Ministry of Defense is about business as usual. So it means we're communicating about exercise, we are communicating about some deployments, some other stuff, but not about the war in Ukraine. And only 20% of that is all about the war in Ukraine. Why it is so? We know that people do not like to get a lot of bad news. Knowing this, MOD is communicating just a limited portion of bad news, or let's call it news from front or news from Ukraine, on their official website, and all the other business is business as usual. So it says for us, knowing the Russia's society, we tailored the communication to what people or what society wants to hear, but not what is the reality itself. And I would say I'll stop here due to our limited, we can, okay, so maybe just one more thought about the insight from television. So as we analyzed only 2 weekly TV shows, so we cannot say something very special about how it's communicated in daily news, but from weekly TV shows, we found that it's very difficult to depict even narratives or to get narratives, what we want to say, because in weekly TV shows, we're talking about everything. I mean, it's difficult in 2 hours or 1.5 hour show to tell the very clear story about some specific events. So we're trying to mix all the events which happen during the week and just showing them. And probably we know what in daily TV shows, situation is a bit different, because we're trying to focus more on one topic and to spend like half an hour. One report can last like that, as we know, like probably typical report in typical television will be like 5 or 6 minutes, but if you spend 30 minutes, it means you're trying to push some narrative and you're trying to push, to share some ideas which are not very easy to share, because you need half an hour to explain what has happened. And here I really will stop, and I'll encourage you, if you have some time, to visit our webpage, stratcomcue.org, and you'll find this report and of course all other reports from our institution. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georgis. Indeed, we want to read this report. We have like 15 minutes as planned to take the question from the audience. So you're welcome to ask for the microphone, which is here at the middle, and to ask your questions. Maybe I will start with the first one for anyone who wants to answer, but as Nina says, it's time to act. If you would look at all the tools that we use now since, let's say, a decade or something like this, which one seems for you the most efficient finally? And behind my question, being philosopher by education, I know that you can't fight against patient without something else that's the patient as well. Patient against patient. And this is the weakness probably of the democracy, because we want more to argue with fact-checking, with reason. But, okay, the goal is certainly not to convince everyone, but at least to keep a level where the society still keeps on track. But if you would speak about these tools that we use, what are for you the most efficient and what are the less efficient, maybe? Who wants to take the floor? Elena.
Fact-checking, just for the sake of fact-checking what you said, because who says this cannot be passionate? The fact-checking. No, I think it's efficient. Bear with me. I know there are many studies that say, well, people want to believe what they want to believe and so on and so forth. But I think that there is, and I'm biased because we have a fact-checking operation, so full disclosure here. But I think that there's something we have to learn from these guys. That first of all, you need to keep your main clients satisfied. And I think that we are looking at fact-checking from perhaps from a wrong angle. I think that fact-checking has the possibility to rally our troops, the ones that are unveiling the truth. I don't think that the scope, the objective of fact-checking should be to necessarily convince the others, but to offer the people that still want to defend the truth all the arguments to be ready to have the conversations they need to have at the Christmas table, at the coffee machine, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to adapt and be reasonable and humble about what we can do just ourselves, and trust a bit the people and empower them to go forward and do some of the heavy lifting. And this can happen by offering them readily accessible data and the manner through which they can build a shared reality. Because in my view, this is the biggest threat to our democracy, is the fact that we no longer have a shared reality. And when you don't have a shared reality, you cannot even start arguing about the possible solutions. First, we need to all agree on the fact that it's light here. If we stop agreeing with this simple truth, and this sometimes happens online, we have a problem.
Yeah, I want also to add about passion. Recently in Kiev we have a Donbas Media Forum, a big conference which collect a lot of journalists, specialist journalists from frontline territories. And we also have a panel about disinformation, how to combat it. And we have a guest from France, also journalist, and she said that it's good for you, for Ukrainians, to fight for truth, because all of you have this one goal and one idea. Of course, it's existential idea, because if we will not survive and defend Russia, we will just stop to exist. But we have this idea. And France, for example, is more polarized and don't have this one idea, like counter-narratives that unite population. And as a fact-checker, of course, I think that fact-checking is very important. Media literacy is really important, but moreover, we have to think about of course, propaganda, as Denis said, it's not a beautiful word, maybe, but it's not so bad either. And we have to think about counter-narratives right now, like a lot. And in each country, we have to find these stories, these narratives that will unite people and explain them what is going on and how they can unite against these all these threats. Because for Ukraine, like the main point became when missiles start like bombarding all our cities, and I don't recommend that experience. Yeah, so it's better to do it in peaceful conditions.
Thank you. Some question there, please.
Sure.
Madam, there, and then yeah.
After, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Lena. I'm basic Moldavian journalist girl, and I have two questions, more technical and more personal. More technical. I Zoomer, and I use every day, every single moment, my social network. I work in social network. We build media on Telegram, and I'm actually, my work is a news writer. And about this big topic about disinformation and protect, everyday think and thought about do we need to make some policy or some position with social network boss. I don't know how it's say correct, because I know that, okay, we need to fight against lies, we need to say people what's wrong, what's right about corruption. But I know that my elder parents saw TikTok every day, and I don't know how correct say them to, you need to ban this information because it's false, it's not right. And in my work, I always think that, okay, how we need to moderate environment when we all work. Because, okay, we don't work in papers. We don't work in, okay, some people work on television, but my generation didn't saw a lot of programs. We make some information from internet and we learn some internet. Do we need more difficult or more useful system to moderate the environment when we all work? We all we make information for this environment, we get information from this environment.
This is your question, yeah?
Yeah, about
First
the
one.
policy or moderation to this and how you connect to the social network system.
The second question then, and
no, and I have the second question personal.
quick, please.
Okay. I'm a little burnout when I see information about different fake and against fake, and it's more question for you, Elena, because some fake system of some fake narratives from Russia is so dehumanization, and how you have your power to break them and to read and read, because when you stay against it, you need to face with it and read every day, and it's
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sir,
Yeah.
we'll take the second question.
Yes.
Short, please.
Thank you. Yep, very short.
Sorry.
Hi, Tommaso Canetta, fact checker from EDMO, EFCSN, and so on. My question is, shouldn't we start talking more openly about United States FIMI? Let me phrase that. The same far-right forces that support Russia in the end, that are based in an anti-vaxxers community and so on, they receive, of course, push from Russia for obvious interest. If they win, they will not support sanctions, military aid to Ukraine and so on. They are also sustained openly by the current US administration, but even more so, because this information, I think it doesn't make the most damages in the short term, but in the medium-long term, by the hammering of disinformation, violence, hateful content, polarizing content that is spread through algorithms of the platforms that are US-based, aside TikTok, it's China-based. And we see now a clear alignment between the administration and these giant tech companies. This is my question to you.
Thank you. Who wants? Yorgis?
Difficult one, yeah, that's for me. Yeah, as I am military, for me, it's not the best question. Of course, it's a tough one. But anyway, I'll phrase it a bit differently, I would say. For every nation and for every organization, there is like a list of priorities. Who is your enemy? And for me as Lithuanian, enemy is very clear, and it's the same for 500 years. So yeah, we do not plan to create some mechanisms about the question you asked. And, I would say it's obvious because, not so long ago we had a discussion with colleagues from Israel, and yeah, we have conflict right now, and we have different enemies, and for them, Russia is one of the priorities, but it's not number one. So, answering your question, I just would say no. From my perspective, there is no such a plans in nearest future.
Who wants to answer the question of the lady?
About mental health. Thank you for that question, and I think it's a really important one because I'm also a senior lecturer in Mohila School of Journalism, and I have different courses, and one of them is ethic of journalism. And I even spent several lessons with my students to talk about mental health, because today it's very important and serious issues. Even if you don't work with disinformation specifically, with Russian media specifically, because I'm working with this from 2016 and I'm still slightly okay. Yeah, of course I'm like taking some pills, but it's also some war issues as well. But yeah, we have some complexity. But anyway, it's really important to pay attention to your condition right now, nowadays in this information space. And even if you have to read Russian media, like a lot of during your working hours, you have to do it to pay attention to it. Just that it just work and that's all, and not to take it really seriously. Because for me it's really hard to do, because I'm Ukrainian, and a lot, like mostly disinformation dedicated to Ukrainians. My husband is in army, and a lot of content also about soldiers. But anyway, we have to understand that to defend it, to work with it, to combat it, we have to stay health. So yeah, it's a really important issue, and thank you for the question. Thank you.
Kira, Denis, 1 minute each.
Just a quick reaction to both questions. I think that maybe this is an idea for Deutsche Welle Academia to actually understand whether the younger generation of journalists that are working in this field could be helped, assisted, so that they don't have any issues related to burnout. I know myself that I'm working on a daily basis, so I consume a lot of disinformation. For work, you have to know how to detox yourself from that information, but it requires a lot of knowledge. So it's one thing when you are dealing with disinformation, you are well trained, or you are just a trained journalist, or you're a trained person that is also teaching, as opposed to when you are a young journalist and you are told do that. So I think that here is really about specialists who can help and who have to guide those who are younger and are doing this job. I think I really appreciate that you are doing this, but take care of your mental health. This is important. And now the second quick reaction to what was asked about the US. I believe that, you know, when a crisis is becoming a crisis, so it's when the politicians, decision makers are recognizing that as a crisis. So if we are dealing with the FIMI issue that involves the US decision makers, it's up to EU decision makers, including candidate states, Moldova and others, to acknowledge that and then to start to work based on that acknowledgement. I think that as of now, there is no intent to even mention that as a big issue. And as we can see from what has been already mentioned, there are other priorities, and Russia is the biggest enemy. So most likely the others are not that urgent enemies. But I believe that this is, in 1 to 2 years, we're going to see more of that, because we have elections in Hungary, which will be probably the first test to see whether Trump and Putin will meet in Budapest and whether that will have a spillover effect on the elections. So there are many things to test, but I agree with you that we have to start talking about that. And unfortunately, at the moment, there is no appetite to really acknowledge this as an issue.
Kara?
No, I have to say something, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah, no, maybe I wanted to go back to the question regarding the regulation of social media. And of course, I don't pretend to be a policy specialist. This is really not my field. I am a data analyst. But of course, we're seeing a lot of steps, you know, in the right direction. Still, you know, with some initial efforts when it comes to Digital Services Act, and also, for example, the application of certain hate speech laws in member states, also to disinformation attacks. That we have also seen in terms of responses. What we always like to advocate from the perspective of my team is to, you know, also go beyond just the idea of having to sanctions the social media. This is, of course, important, to regulate that space, but also to think of alternative technical solution to make it more costly for certain disinformation assets to operate. Okay, may it be targeting the flow of money, and I know someone will talk about it tomorrow. Or may it be simply applying cyber security responses also to FIMI. For example, we have seen, I don't know, when someone impersonates Le Figaro and some Russian company decides to set up the website to pretend they are Le Figaro, then how do we make sure that at that asset that there is a lawsuit launched, by the newspaper itself, and the newspaper feels empowered to launch the lawsuit so that the domain is taken down and we have one asset less. I would like also, just to, spark this conversation to think about this solution as a sort of comprehensive sort of pool of solution that goes beyond just social media, but also goes, also into other domains and to find more technical solutions to this.
Thank you very much. I will close the panel now. I think we are almost on time. I think with this panel we managed to launch today's conference in the track that Nina, you just showed us, like having a very deep and good analysis, and we need endlessly to work on that because it's difficult and it's necessary, but also to act. It's time to act, as you said. So we can continue the discussion during this coffee break that we have now. Sorry, you wanted?
Yeah, one more quick question. So, hello everyone, I'm Luchan, founder of DeepGuard, and I tool that detects manipulation in real time. And I wanted to ask, with the rise of deepfakes and AI-generated content, how are fact-checkers adapting to the new era, and what are their methods to verify videos more effectively?
We don't have time. We have a coffee, you can ask, and then also, I guess in the next panels you will have opportunity to ask questions. Sorry, but we have to more or less keep the schedule. Thank you very much.
Yes, I want to invite all of you to the coffee break. We will resume.
It's also things such as political advertisement, which, as you may know, is now, banned by the EU. Yet, I've already seen reports that certain Geert Wilders content, for example, is still online, and the list goes on. We also cover issues such as fraud and scam, and I know we all probably on this panel want to talk about the Reuters story that broke yesterday about something that combines both fraud and scam and ads, and which has very big structural problems. As to the trends that we've seen, so I would say we started taking cases last year, not quite yet a year ago. So we're still, this is early stages, and also this hasn't been done before, right? So we have a lot of teething problems that we're seeing. We've seen, and we just published our first transparency report now in October. I encourage you to go to appealcenter.eu, have a look around, have a look at our transparency report. There's some interesting data in there that I hope you might find useful, and as fact checkers you may scrutinize it and come to me with questions, please. We've seen three broad trends. First is there's great demand for this issue, but also lack of visibility for especially individual users. Not enough people know about this right, and platforms are deliberately obfuscating this right to their users. Second, platforms do make quite a good bunch of moderation mistakes. That is not surprising. And third, there's mixed cooperation with the platforms, right? The level of engagement, the quality of engagement is very mixed. We started out working with Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok last year, the three biggest ones in the EU for social media platforms. We've since added Instagram, Threads, and Pinterest. The latter two are not covered in the report because we didn't have data yet. But safe to say that one platform stood out particularly, and that was YouTube. Since pretty much a year ago that we've started doing this, YouTube has not shared with us a single piece of content. And that's content we need to do our job, which is to evaluate whether or not it goes against some kind of rules or values, right? So no content, no proper way to engage for us with this process. And of course, more importantly, no credible avenue for users as foreseen by the legislation to challenge these decisions to an independent out-of-court dispute settlement body. We have seen a similar pattern to a lesser extent in other platforms, specifically to meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram, but also on TikTok, where we're not getting the content that we need from the platforms, or it's taking too long. We spend more time chasing for the content instead of actually looking and evaluating the content. And I would say those are some of the biggest trends. We would say in general the engagement is positive when there is engagement, but we can also see that, you know, like public debate is trying to distract from some of these things, the platforms are equally trying to distract from some of the points in which they don't engage with very specific technical things. But I think we need to look at the bigger picture and see, are they just waiting to the point where we drag them to court, where they can beat us with armies of lawyers? Or is there going to be some regulatory intervention in between? Who knows?
So I see they're playing this distraction game, which is something we're also seeing about their relationship with fact-checking organization, which is one of the major platform decisions we've been focusing on. So Marie, what can you tell us about the state of platforms and fact-checking organizations' collaboration? How does the DSA play into this, and what are the ways forward?
Thank you very much for having us here. It's really humbling to hear everything that we have been hearing until now, and to see how our Georgian and Moldovan colleagues and Romanian colleagues are working on this. So I just wanted to give a bit of context about AFP. We are working on fact-checking more specifically as a format since 2017. We are working in 26 languages around the world, around 15 languages in Europe, and we are producing around 7,000 fact checks per year. So I just want to say this not to show big numbers, but to say that this is a considerable amount of reliable information going out there on social media and other channels as well. And it's important for what we are going to discuss today, what we are doing in terms of the production of fact-checking, but also my colleagues of the EFCSN. So I'm also part of the governance body of the EFCSN, which we'll hear more of later on. And I think, yeah, it's important to keep this in mind in terms of we always have the impression to be trying to empty the sea with a little spoon, but at the same time, I think the volume that is produced by fact-checkers around the world is huge, and it's important to acknowledge it. I want to also get back to basics when it comes to the relation between fact-checkers and the platforms, and regulation as well. So, going back to the platforms, the whole idea for the platforms entering into regulation is to not be recognized as producers of content. That's super important for the platforms themselves in terms of regulation, because they don't want to be accountable for the content that is circulating online on their own channels. And the DSA says, okay, we can accept that if you mitigate these risks by actually investing in protecting the users from the disinformation, from illegal content, from other aspects. And that's how also platforms are actually engaging with fact-checkers, which are independent, which are certified by independent assessors. And I think it's important also to say that again, because it's not always super clear for everyone. I also wanted to start by things that have been working in the relationship between platforms and fact-checkers, because there are things that work, and we're also here to talk about that because we want to maintain this and to reinforce it as much as possible. For example, when it comes to Meta, as we can see in the transparency reports that they are doing under the DSA and the code of practice, now the code of conduct under the DSA, the reshares have been 1/3 of the reshares of disinformation content have been stopped because of the work that is being done with fact checkers. So that means that it has an impact at scale on the platform. Like each individual fact check has an impact at scale, and that's really important to acknowledge. I also want to acknowledge the fact that the third-party fact-checking program of Meta is something that has been enormous for the fact-checking community, because it has given the community to actually put more resources into producing this content all around the world. But we also are very conscious of the dependency in which it puts the fact-checkers in their relation to the platforms. And that's also why we expect things like regulation to actually be able to balance and give a bit more fairness in this relationship. When it comes to Google, there has been some positive as well on the Google side, although more on the Google side than on the YouTube side, if I can say that. But for example, Google has been supporting a project that we had around the European elections, which allowed the European fact-checkers to get together and to produce more than 3,000, not to produce them, but to gather them in a common database and to be able to have a meta level of analysis of the trends and the narratives of this information that we have been seeing across Europe, across languages, across countries ahead of the European elections. Another deal that has been struck with Google a long time ago is the one of claim review. It's a bit technical, but basically it allows fact-checkers to, it's a tool that allows fact-checkers to share some of their metadata, and the deal with Google was actually to make that data accessible to Google search, but also to other platforms, to make it more visible for every user of the internet and to get more access to reliable information. Well, things have changed in the meantime because Google themselves have decided to how do you say that, to move back on that decision and to not use claim review in the Google searches results anymore, though claim review is maintained for now. So that's another thing to discuss. And when it comes to TikTok, I think they are very good at discussing and having a lot of conversations and being very open to fact checkers. But in terms of the fact-checking program, I think it lacks a lot of transparency still. But they're also making more efforts in terms of media literacy, for example, to make the fact-checkers' work accessible to people online. But in the meantime, so even before Trump's re-election, we have been seeing how asymmetric this relationship is between fact-checkers and the platforms. And also, as I was saying, the level of dependency puts us in a situation of precarity as well. Because with these scarce resources, we need to be participating in a lot of conversations and debates and in the framework of the regulation at European level with the platforms, but with means that are very, very different in terms of input. And also, of course, it puts the fact of having this dependency on the finances of the Meta fact-checking program also puts us in a situation of precarity with the teams in terms of the renewal of the contracts, etc. I'm not sure that the DSA can do much about that, but I still think it's important to say it on where we are staying now. Another thing, and that relates to the question of Tommaso before about the possibility of a US FIMI consideration, is that we have been seeing growing narratives and attacks on fact-checkers in these past years, and this has been also relayed by the platforms and especially by Meta when Mark Zuckerberg himself has announced the end of the fact-checking program, expressing the fact that fact-checkers were too politicized when fact-checkers are actually not able to rate any political content on Meta's platform, but also that fact-checkers were actually censors when no censorship at all is required by fact-checkers. We always advocate to platforms to actually add more information, labeling content, but not removing any content, and that's something we have been advocating for since the beginning. So I will stop here, but I think it gives you an idea of where we stand.
a very turbulent relationship, that most of the, not most, but many of the conversations between fact-checking organizations and the platforms have been happening in the fora created by the Code of Conduct now. So it used to be a code of practice with voluntary commitments. They're still voluntary after the conversion, but now they create legal obligations. And during this process of conversion, many platforms have walked away from many of the measures, many impacting agreements with fact-checkers, for example. So now I'll turn over our heads to Alberto. So maybe he can talk about this conversion process and how the European Commission reacts to platform decision on their measures, and how the Commission understands the relationship between the code and the DSA enforcement.
Thank you, Marina, for this question, and thank you everyone for inviting me to this event. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will try to give you a little bit, to give to the audience a little bit of information about this conversion process and what it means. Although we have to consider that the DSA, and in particular this co-regulatory framework, which sees the Code of Conduct as part of the regulation, is something very new, and so I think we will need to be patient in order to see which result it will be able to bear. But going back to the process of the conversion, as you know, back, or maybe you don't know, back in 2022, a revised version of the code, much more granular, with, if I remember correctly, more than 120 commitment and measures, was agreed and signed by the platforms, but not only, also by other signatories which are not providing any social media or search engine service, which have worked together in the drafting of the code of practice on this information, the second code of practice on this information, because the first one dates back to 2018. At that stage, platform have also sent in the list of commitment and measure that they were taking on board, because of course not all the measures were drafted for all the platform, for all the services. To this, after following the signature of the new code, there were a couple of years of implementation of this new code. Platform have been reporting every 6 months of implementation of the code, and we, when I say we, the task force that is behind the code, which includes all the signatories of the code, so both platforms, but also non-platform organizations, so CSOs, fact-checkers, have worked together in this task force for the implementation of the code. There were, for instance, I would like to measure first attempt to implement the structural indicators, which intends to measure the phenomenon of disinformation and the impact of the code on this phenomenon. I think also on this we have break ground. But as was said before by Marina, I think, at least from my point of view, the biggest achievement of this new code was this task force. So the multi-stakeholder support and engagement for the implementation of the code. This allowed to have a continuous exchange of views, sometimes also quite, let's say, quite difficult exchanges, quite difficult discussion among the different stakeholders, but we believe that this discussion brought various fruits. I mentioned the structural indicators, and something that has been relevant also for Moldova. Somehow the rapid response system was tested during the European election, during several national elections in the EU, and thanks to this cooperation that was happening inside the code, it was also possible to implement this the escalation mechanism that was put in place during the Moldovan election. So this mechanism allows CSOs and fact-checkers, signatories of the code, to flag content to platform, to the attention of the platforms. And then it is for the platform to assess if this content breaks their terms of service when we talk about, the protection of the integrity of the electoral process. So, again, this was something that we managed to achieve in the self-regulatory regime. As of the 2nd of July, the code was brought into the DSM framework. So the Commission issued a positive opinion on the code. So the code could be considered, is considered a meaningful benchmark for the signatory to somehow achieve what they are requested to do in terms of systemic risk related to disinformation. Now, of course, it's not that signing the code is sufficient to get a blank check on DSA compliance. On the contrary, the code could gives a signal of signing the code and implementing the code is a signal to goodwill, to be compliant with the DSA. But of course, the platform will also be required to show us how they have implemented the code, how far they go with their engagement with all the relevant commitment and measure of the code. And of course, all this will somehow inform the DSA mechanism, but it will be for the DSA colleagues to understand if, in case platform have not decided not to sign the code, how they address the problem of disinformation. So, this is all ongoing. The code, I want to stress, remain a voluntary mechanism in the co-regulatory regime, and we are now, basically, as of the 2nd of July, we enter in a new phase. I think that I would like to stress once more this collaboration, spirit of collaboration that is behind the code. And also the importance of, this collaboration. And I believe that the level of collaboration that we see within the code is also thanks to the DSA. The fact that we have a regulation that make platform responsible not for the content, when we are talking about harmful content, not for the content they host, but for the functioning of their system in relation to systemic risk. And for instance, we have seen, and Marina mentioned, or Marie mentioned the troublesome relationship between fact-checking organization and platforms. Well, yes, the relationship is difficult all over the place, all over the globe, but I think that in Europe the relationship is better than in the US, for instance, where fact-checking organizations have seen the contracts with platform ended when in regards to fact-checking. So I think the fact that in Europe this relationship is still alive, it's the result of the presence of regulation and also the fact that we have in place this co-regulatory regime with the Code of Conduct of Disinformation. So I would stop here, and of course I'll be happy to take further questions later, or also or answering to other questions from the moderators.
Thank you, Alberto. So inside the code, there's commitments to report on how signatories are complying with the measures they are undertaking. And the FCSN does a work of fact-checking those reports. So Stefan, what can you tell us about those highlights of those reports?
Well, first I think it's fair to say what Alberto said, that the code has a spirit of cooperation implemented in it, but that spirit is a bit waning at the moment. I'll give you one example. When the code was written and signed in 2022, YouTube signed all commitments for fact-checking. So they said, okay, we're going to work with fact-checkers, we're going to pay them fairly, and we're going to integrate fact-checking in our platform, which we thought was a very good idea because it turns out there is a lot of disinformation on YouTube. They never did any of these things. They gave a little bit of money to an IFCN fund. They never integrated fact-checking properly into their services. They never worked with fact-checkers properly. And when it came to the DSA and the transformation of the code of practice into a code of conduct, meaning that the code got more teeth to it, they unsubscribe because platforms have the right under a code of conduct, since it's a voluntary framework, to choose the measures and commitments they want to adhere to, because they can say, like, look, this is not relevant to our services, and YouTube said, like, look, fact-checking is not relevant to our services. Though I would argue there is a lot of disinformation on YouTube. A recent study led by Science Feedback has shown that. And they're not doing enough. In fact, they're doing very little. And the fact that some of the platforms that are signatories of the Code of Conduct have pulled out of certain commitments in the fight against disinformation is, in my view, in itself, proof or a signal that they're not fully compliant with the DSA. Because the Code of Conduct on disinformation is the benchmark in fighting disinformation by a platform. They have to prove that they're doing something on the problem, and being fully compliant with the Code of Conduct is one of that evidences. So they're not doing it fully, so they, in my view, are not fully compliant with the DSA, but I'm not making this decision. This is up to the European Commission. I can happily voice my concerns, but I would strongly, we strongly encourage the European institutions to implement and enforce the DSA robustly, because platforms have an outsized control and power in our information ecosystems, and that needs to be reined in, especially when we look to the US. When we see what's coming from the US, it's getting worse, and they need to step up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we have this call to action to the European Commission, who is above our heads, and I see Victoire keep looking at the screen. And so should we zoom out even more on platform decision and talk about money? So I want to ask you about the DSA's approach to monetization, if there's any approach, and how the structure of the DSA is built above this issue.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Marina, and thank you for having me. I think it's always about the money, essentially. So I run an organization called What to Fix, and for the last few years, we've been looking at social media monetization practices. So really, how those companies are not just making money from content, but actually paying content publishers and creators, right? There are multiple ways that this happens, whether it's through partnerships with brands that platforms facilitate, or through fan subscriptions or tips. But I think what many people aren't really aware of is that platforms themselves are also paying content publishers and creators. And this process and practices have actually grown quite a lot since the introduction of the DSA. So the DSA, to answer your question, Marina, doesn't really capture this issue in the way that it should, and that there's been so much changes in that space over the last 3 to 5 years, right? In 2023, we estimated that combined, the platforms were redistributing about $20 billion a year. Since then, there's been a huge increase in those programs. If I look at Meta, for example, they added 7.5 million accounts that now monetize since the beginning of the year. So we've now just exceeded 10 million. And the way those programs are actually being rolled out is extremely reckless. So our research showed, for example, that actors such as Russia Today or Sputnik were enrolled for monetization for months after they were placed under EU sanctions. We are seeing political actors, politicians, government agencies, so a lot of police and military pages, for example, are making money from Facebook. We're seeing a whole lot of actors. We're also seeing a lot of disinformation actors, that platforms are paying fact checkers to fact check, but also paying to produce content in the first place, right? So there's this challenge here. And meanwhile, we're seeing the media and authentic creators really struggle to access revenue, because advertisers are increasingly going towards this platform. So the DSA touches on monetization a little bit, but in ways that are no longer really fit for purpose. So in the code, for example, there was a commitment to demonetizing disinformation. Now, over the last 6 years, we've been collecting data on all the Facebook and Instagram accounts that have made money from Meta. So we have now released a fully searchable database of that entire archive. And what you can see is, when they sign up to a commitment to demonetize disinformation, well, yeah, they may demonetize an account when a fact checker fact checks them, but only to remonetize them a few days later. Right? So there's a pattern of remonetization. And so in a way, this platform sort of failing to comply with what was a voluntary commitment now is becoming slightly more heavy. But even in the systemic risks assessment, for example, so in the DSA, platforms are supposed to identify what they see as a risk and provide information on how they will mitigate these, right? None of the platforms have talked about their monetization services in any of their reports to date. So they are not acknowledging that the way that they actually decide who gets money has an impact on systemic risks, right? It's fueling disinformation, but it's also financing illegal content. It's impacting the media and a whole range of other risks. That's not touched upon in that regard. The DSA also sort of looks at this issue from the lens of digital advertising. So there's a bit of a sense that if we regulate the digital advertising ecosystem, then we can actually control where the advertising money ends up. Now, platforms, and this is again part of the platform playbook in that regard, is that they shifted the way that they operate their monetization system so that to distinguish them from the advertising system. So a few years ago, the general understanding was that if there were ad placement within content, those ad placement belonged to the publisher. And that if you wanted to make money, then you could get the services of the platform to help you sell those ads and get you a share of the revenue and a share to the platform for facilitating that auction. In 2020, YouTube basically decided that from now on, all the ad placements on the services are theirs. It's no longer the publisher. So there's essentially been a massive robbery that has taken place that isn't really being talked about, but creators have lost the ownership of the ad placements on their content. And platforms have replaced this with a different approach, which is to pay content royalties to these actors. Now, it is a big shift for a couple big reasons. The first one is that all the digital advertising regulation that are being introduced are no longer applicable. The platform is no longer an ad exchange. They run an ad business. They sell ad placements that they own to advertisers. And then they run a entirely separate content business where they buy content. But those two things are no longer connected. So the regulation that's coming through is no longer really applicable. And that's a way that they're wiggling their way out of the DSA and the DMA and a bunch of other things. It's also critical for a second reason, which is that now that the platforms can make money off of any content without the consent of the publishers, they don't really need the publishers anymore. And they can essentially shut off the payments at any point. So the risk now is that as we start to raise those concerns about who they are paying and the need for more transparency and oversight and more scrutiny into the rollout of those monetization program, well, there's a risk that platforms are going to do what they just did with the regulation on political advertising and essentially say, you're not happy with our monetization services? Okay, we'll just stop paying anybody. And there you go, right? Which will not actually be good for any of us. So I think that just basically puts us to the situation in which there's many ways platforms are finding ways out of regulation. They've got many tools in their playbook. I think Sophie briefly mentioned the Reuters article, the investigation that came out yesterday on ads, in particular, ads around scam. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. Platform estimated that they will make $16 billion from scam ads last year, right? They also estimated that they will most likely get a fine, almost definitely, but that this fine will not exceed $1 billion. So if you do math, you know you're going to make $16 billion, you may get $1 billion in fine. Again, we need regulation. We need the regulation to be enforced, but we also need to think about the incentive and whether the regulation actually has sufficient teeth to change the game.
Thank you, all of you. I know we're over time, but I'm willing to take some minutes from my presentation afterwards to see if the audience has one quick question, maybe, about the evil DSA. Over there. A quick question with quick answers, if possible.
Okay, thank you. Maiko from Detector, thank you very much for your insights, and a very quick question. So can DSA ensure what happened in the US won't be repeated in Europe? And what's your general assessment? Do you see any progress with the platform, especially with Facebook and X? And do you have any expectations from the X that they will change their policy in terms of moderation, or at least give free API access to the researchers? Thank you.
So on the question whether the US could replicate in the EU, I think that is a possibility. I think the US is a very different media system, so what's happening in the US now is a result of developments that started in the mid-90s with the rise of talk radios, with the end of the fairness doctrine, so it's a different setup there. But overall, I think the wave of disinformation and the enshittification, as Cory Doctorow put it, of our information spaces puts us at risks and is basically a favor to wannabe autocrats. So yes, it can happen. And I forgot the second question, so I'm going to refer to Marie.
I was also going to reply to the same aspect of it. I think that what protected us from the end of the third-party fact-checking program in the rest of the world, not only in Europe for now, it's really continuing in the rest of the world, is the fact that it was a very political decision that was made in the US and that was also made to please Donald Trump in the first place and to please this government. I hope that the DSA or other types of regulations around the world is strong enough to actually prevent this from happening in Europe as well. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there is something very fragile about this, because disinformation is a systemic risk, but it's a systemic risk only in the introduction. It's part of the systemic risk, but the DSA is on more on illegal content than on specifically fighting disinformation. So there is always something that we need to defend in that framework. And I'm not sure it's going to be enough if there is a political decision in Europe to also go in that direction. But hopefully.
I mean, just to bring it back to the money again, I think the main argument that fact checkers in Europe have is to actually highlight and demonstrate how much of the stuff that they fact check is there because of the money and the incentive that platform monetization programs offer in the first place, right? This is effectively a problem that they created and that they have to take care of. And when we look at the changes that have occurred in the US, part of the change to move to community note was also to say that now if something is fact check on community note, nothing happens to it. It no longer gets demonetized. And so I think for me, European fact-checkers and fact-checkers from broader regions as well should really invest time in highlighting how much the stuff that they are fact-checking is not just circulated by platform, but actually in many ways incentivized and created by platforms themselves.
Thank you. So I see Salome already standing. So thank you, all of you, for your insights. I think we could spend hours talking about the DSA, but we'll keep monitoring platform decision and trying to make the DSA work. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much. We will be moving to the next session, poster sessions that will showcase several studies in addition to the practical toolkit, and the session will be moderated by our own Anna Chitaladze from Detector.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Chitaladze. I represent Detector, and it's my pleasure to moderate this poster session today. This session brings together recent research contributions along with the FIMI toolkit, each addressing the challenge of foreign information manipulation and interference from different perspectives, but with a shared purpose to understand how influence operations evolve and what their consequences are. This has become increasingly important as such operations grow more coordinated, adaptive, and influential globally, and particularly Eastern Partnership countries. We are seeing how FIMI increasingly overlaps with domestic narratives, political polarization, and institutional vulnerabilities. The researchers presented here reflect these dynamics across different national and analytical contexts. As you move forward this session, I invite you to keep the broader picture in mind, how these dynamics connect across countries and what this means for democracy. To open this session, we turn to Moldovan case. Our first presentation, Narrative Intelligence for Information Integrity, case of Moldova, examines narrative manipulation during Moldovan recent elections. This research is very fresh and timely. It will be delivered by Manuela Proeteza, the lecturer at the University of Bucharest and founder of association Bridge, together with Professor Natalia Vasilindiuk, University of Bucharest. Manuela, Natalia, the floor is yours.
It's okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much. I'll speak about PROMPT. This is a project which we are developing. It is developed by a consortium, which is a multinational consortium and also interdisciplinary. We have a summary, a prompt at a glance, the methodology, the tool itself, because we provide a tool through this project, a tool to combat disinformation, some results as an example, some analysis and some samples of reporting based on this corpus, which is already analyzed, and my colleague, Professor Vasile Duke, already made this in-depth analysis with a human touch on the corpus, including social media posts from the election, from the Moldovan election period. So to start my presentation, I'll try to be very short. The project, as I said, is about narrative intelligence for information integrity. Is a project financed by DigiConnect and is led by operational science company OpSI.ai. It's a research institute in France. As I said, with multidisciplinary and multinational components. University of Urbino from Italy, from Hungary, Center for Social Sciences, Riga Strandis University from Latvia, and Erich Broch Institute from Germany, just to name, let's say, the key academic institute and research institute, but also with media partners and fact-checking partners as displayed on the screen. Prompt is developing automated real-time content analysis with characteristic of scalability, detection of semantic shifts, irony, and emotional tone. The question is, how was the AI trained in this project? And I will list a few components. First of all, I think it's very important to point to the semantic axiological matrix, which also referred to a code book, which is will be displayed in a minute. This includes analysis of how language in social media posts aligns with various political ideologies, so it was quite a sophisticated alignment between the messages from the social media and the political discourse. But very importantly, it was based on journalistic variables like facticity, verifiability, and also axiological attributes and rhetorical figures. So it was very, very well founded on quite a sophisticated matrix, I would say. Also, it was used to test diverse sample of country-specific disinformation cases, and you will hear about the case study of Moldova a bit later from my colleague. Tools and tactics. In terms of methodology, we all know that methodology is critically important in such analysis, and I would refer to two basic components. On one hand, we also know that is specific to disinformation, the inauthentic coordinated behavior, which was analyzed here by in two aspects: timestamp aged, which showed in various analyses the coordination of inauthentic behavior, and also time-sliced networks. The network was divided into a snapshot for comparison across events and periods. Also framing theories, amplification mechanism, but includes also analysis of stylistic and contextual features, sentiment analysis, and it has a component of cross-lingual dissemination, which is also highly important. In technical, let's say, terms, it integrated natural language processes with network analysis, which we all know from literature that it's essential to study digital narratives. It was based on similar initiatives, and it has synergies with other initiatives which are displayed. I will not list them to save time. The partners within the consortium are involved in those initiatives. We can provide details on it as well. About the coding, this is highly important. Of course, I will not refer in detail, but just the overview. Of course, we define the theme. the themes. We define the disinformation typology, and just some examples. For instance, we have here clickbait, and we have the definitions as well. For instance, exaggeration to attract attention, but conspiracy theories, we also have the definitions, and so on. Biased on one side, pseudoscience, rumor, fake review, and so on. We also included facticity, truthfulness, verificability, yes or no. But we also have the format, visual representation, the platform where that post was distributed, and the geography. About the tool, I would just display examples of definitions, but they are presented in details. There is a reference here, so we have a first report with all these definitions, which are included in our coding book. About the tool itself, because this is, I suppose, the main interest. Of course, we can show it interactively, probably during the break, but here it's only, it's only displayed in a non-interactive way. If we access the link, it's a very interactive way. I will explain a bit the sections of it. So there is this info scanner where someone can simply post some text to check if includes this information, but the component I would refer priority, let's say, is a corpus analyzer, which can be used by researchers, media factors, or professionals in general. We have some databases already included on elections in Romania, on elections in Moldova, on very specific issues like Kostyuk network in Moldova, and some other databases. And based on that, we will present some information, but before to present the examples, I want to stress out that there is a possibility to test this tool, which is not available to the public in this phase. We are in the beta phase right now, but there is a button, if we scroll down the first page of our website, and there is a QR code also available. There is a possibility to become a tester, and at the same time we have a MOOC. We have an online course which is available for students, and that's it. A few results as samples, right? Just to realize what the tool can do. Their results can be about the narrative clusters, about the rhetorical patterns, about the languages, and we see some example of the narratives. Of course, we all somehow know about those narratives, like just to give some examples, the EU is a neo-colonial project, Russia seeks peace and has a moral obligation to protect it, the Ukraine government is legitimate. So those are based on quantitative analysis, and we can track the cluster, but also details about the posts. Some examples here as well of the main narratives, the main disinformation narratives which were identified, and some patterns. It's important to have an idea about the pattern. Of course, it's an interactive graph, so if we click on each share, we can find details, just some examples which are posted into this slide. And we can create also analysis reports based on this quantitative figures. There is an example. It's a very, very intense and very solid analysis, including about the coordinated inauthentic behavior made by Martinescu and Dima. It's also referenced down the page. we provided the links also to it. So, but it's open. It's an open analysis for fact checkers and for media professionals, for researchers. Of course, so those data can be used in various forms. Here are only some examples of some analyses which were already done on Moldova, and a sample also from a very early stage of the platform, and we published an article on the rerun elections in Romania, identifying inauthentic coordinated behavior. So that is from my part. My colleague, Professor Vasile Duc, will continue with the analysis on Moldova with a summary, with I would say robust summary about what happens with the analysis. Thank you so much.
3 minutes? Yes, 2 minutes. Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Natalia Vasilenduc. I'm from University of Bucharest, and today I represent academia. This means it's a great tool to try. Every of you can, as Manuel already said, can try our beta tool, and even to understand how it's work by registering at our pages with this course. Initially, I wasn't invited to this conference, but we decided to present a test, and now I'm here as a tester from academia, and I invite all journalists who are here today to try this tool. It's a great tool to understand how disinformation is spread, and our presentation is about Moldova. So I will be very short because we need 2-3 hours to present all the data. So starting with some ideas about the pilot, Manuel already said. Let's talk a little bit about data and methods from Moldova. Let's start with, let's say, code book presented by Manuela. After we use this tool, we identify more than 5,000 posts, messages, articles about the Moldovan election. Of course, it is not a statistically representative data set. However, these linguistic models was like a pilot. It's only tried to identify during a very short period. We collected data from starting with 1st of June till 23rd of September. And what was shocking for us to identify from more than 5,000 post articles from different type of social media that 69%, almost 70% of all of them were flagged as disinformation about election. And the last week before election was the most active. About 1,600 item posted was about, our tool identifies as disinformation. Another important result was about views. We identify more than 32 million views on these posts considered disinformation, and only 1%, this means 52 posts, reach more than 60% of all views. It is kind of, we can consider that this result shocking because we don't know other research on this area on election of Moldova who can spread this kind of disinformation and even identify them as our tour did. So a few important information about results. I'll move on. Rapidly. Here you can see our figures and a few examples of technique which were used by different accounts. We identify 1,000 accounts who spread these messages. We found 55 manipulation techniques, and some of them, if I can name them, like naming or labeling persons, like a lot of politicians were targeted with words like traitors, puppets, corrupt, Nazi, anti-family, and so on. one. Or for example, an important technique was ad hominem attack, like using insults instead of arguments. All of them, if you move the cursor, you can find 55 different techniques for only like a very small percentage of messages. Let's move to another figure here. Let's say, sorry. We also identify some rhetorical figures. In this case, it's more like academic analysis. However, we identify 3,600 entries, and 14 rhetorical figures were detected. Some narratives like amplification, comparison, contrast. You'll see in our already published paper a lot of cases of repetition, redundancy, storytelling, anecdotes. All of them are linked to this kind of messages and disinformation. What is important about platforms? TikTok and Telegram were 99% presented these posts, and few. Sorry, I will stop now. About clusters. People who did the research method knows that clustering is one of the most important content analysis, and we identified here, you can see some examples of grouping messages on some important stories about Moldovan election. You can see that Ukrainian is the top of disinformation messages transmitted through our social network. Also, there is a lot of information about Western crime, war crime in Ukraine, and Western propaganda. But most importantly, there is a message which circulated even today. It's about Russia. There is strong messages about Russia who seek peace and, as you know, has a duty to stabilize this neighborhood. We still now, even in the morning, I found on the TikTok, which is ruling in Moldova, this kind of messages. So I stop here. If you want to test our tool, please enter. We have here, sorry. This QR code, find or create your own data set and try to participate in this great project. Thank you.
Thank you for this interesting project and sharing it with us. Now we turn to Georgian context. Our next presentation, When Foreign Allies with Domestic, FIMI and Informational Autocracy in Georgia. And this research covers very important topics, as Georgia, once a leading state in Eastern Partnership, now unfortunately experiencing a serious reversal and democratic backsliding, even reflected in the European Commission statement 3 days ago, which describes Georgia as a candidate country in name only. This presentation will be delivered by Tamer Inzurashvili, Editor-in-Chief of Detector and Laureate of Marine Initiative. Tamer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody. I will try briefly describe Georgian situation, and Georgia is the best example how FIMI and informational autocracy are reinforcing each other. 2 years ago, when with Maldita we started to prepare this project for EU call, it was mainly about foreign information manipulation and interference. However, we see overlap between the methods, messages, narratives, and modus operandi between foreign and local actors, and it makes differentiation of the foreign hostile actors method difficult from local one, and methods are very sophisticated. So informational autocracy tries to mimic democratic institution. They are trying to convince the majority of people that they are most competent one, while attacking informed elites and fabricating cases against them. So I will show with different examples how it influences public opinion, because when we talk about the state actors, government itself creates agenda, and most popular TV channels in Georgia are controlled by government. When we did the study and survey and asked people who is the source of foreign information manipulation and interference, only 24% mentioned Russia, while in total 31% mentioned EU and US together. So this is indication that government propaganda works much effectively, and the picture was a little bit different a few years ago, and everything started with Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine when Georgian government became openly anti-Western. So there are three main pillars and the clusters of narratives. We identify both Kremlin, Georgian government, and the conservative Russia-affiliated actors rely on. The first is a sovereign democracy topic. We don't want another Moscow dictating us how to behave. This is a reversal move against the EU institutions and commitments Georgia took when we became EU candidate status, but it's not about only visa-free travel, it's about shared values and about democratization of local institutions. The second most powerful message is about the war fears and about the so-called Ukrainization of Georgia, voiced by all three actors simultaneously. And the third topic is a threat of losing identity, which is very popular, but modus operandi again different, and we will see some examples. So you can see on this screen overlapping messages between Russian president accusing the EU lacking sovereignty, and same message delivered by the ruling Georgian Dream Party and conservative movement, which is affiliated with Kremlin. Moreover, we see messages about the West interfering in our elections rather than Russia interfering in domestic elections. And you can see the statements made by Russian intelligence services, Georgian state security services. For the first time in 2020, four state security services were accusing the West in interference in local elections rather than Russia. So besides the Russia, all neighboring autocratic countries are supporting democratic backsliding in Georgia, and Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs disseminated the statements widely amplified by pro-government channels against the NED, and Aliyev publicly supported the Georgian government when they adopted the so-called foreign agent law. To understand the better context, Georgia was for a long time safe space for journalists in exile from Russia, Belarus, and other authoritarian countries. That's why, from regional perspective, for our neighbors, it's a good opportunity to restrict democratic space and to attack democratic actors locally, and to attack at the same time Western partners supporting democratic pro-European forces locally. If we go to the next slide, you can see statements related to war in Ukraine. And this is response on criticism, mainly on democratic reforms, because Georgia took a commitment to modernize our judicial system, to reform the judiciary and ensure freedom of press. And we see how the Lavrov and other bad actors are supporting these actions. About the global world party messages, besides the Lavrov statement and the ruling party statement, we are also witnessing this assessment from Gerasimov, considering EU and the US as non-regional actors, trying to keep Georgia on EU path, and in addition to convert Armenia and to make them against the Russian operation and consider the Armenia as a part of the Western society rather than sphere of the influence of Russia and post-Soviet countries. These are pre-election posters used by Georgian Dream ahead of the election, speculating on this war and peace narrative, showing destroyed churches in Ukraine on the one hand, and the build the Orthodox churches in Georgia. And it's very powerful because when it concerns the war, especially among elderly people who experience war twice, they are most vulnerable to such propaganda used by ruling party, and ruling party has much bigger coverage in terms of the reach of audience. Who is the global war party or the deep state dragging Georgia into the war? They are not referring directly to EU or the US, rather than saying there are some forces influencing decision makers in EU and US, and even they are highlighting specifically Baltic countries who are dragging Georgia into the war because Russia should target them next, and they are sacrificing our lives for their security. And government propaganda also is engaged in this process. So on identity-related topics, modus operandi is different. While pro-Russian actors are mostly speculating, trying to present Moscow as a third Rome who tries to defend us from pervert West, for government actors more rely on Western conservative far-right groups, and they are speculating on division within the Western society. They are not saying that we abandon our pro-Westernization agenda, rather than saying that EU is actually abandoning their traditional values, and they have a role model as Orban as a protector of the conservative values in the Western society. We also witnessed different approach in the alternatives. While pro-Kremlin actors are in favor of the closer relationship with Russia, they are also advocating for removal of the constitutional provision which guarantees Georgia's EU-NATO integration, and it is based on the referendum which was organized several years ago. Georgian Dream still claims that they will integrate Georgia into EU in 2030, and EU has chance to be free of influence of global world party and so-called deep states. At the same time, they launched a proxy organization called Neutral Georgia, which advocates for neutrality and calls for referendum to revise the decision and to revise constitution and to revise the decision of Georgian people to join the NATO. So this is also pre-election banner of Georgian Dream using the EU colors and the slogan that only through peace, dignity and prosperity towards Europe. So they are misleading their supporters who are pro-European that the EU integration is not over, while this is a window of opportunity opened for all Eastern Partnership countries simultaneously, and unfortunately we are missing this momentum. The Dugin and the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs are vocal against Georgia's EU integration. For instance, Dugin says that integration into EU means going against Trump and against Russia, and now Georgia could stay either with other sovereign countries like Hungary or US, but not to be part of European Union. There are some examples how social media was used by different marketing and entertainment pages for anti-EU campaign. Meta removed these pages, but this is a good example how the Russia ran a network avoided the platform's policy to advertise political content through entertainment pages and marketing pages. So, about the influence of China, we see some examples how Global Times was quoted and distributed by different pro-government and pro-Russian actors and against Ukraine, against EU and NATO. And I will skip since we have limited time. We analyzed also more than 100 disinformation and manipulation cases, and you can see that both Russian and Georgian sources are mostly targeting EU and EU countries, followed by US, Ukraine, and others. About the methods in the election, during the Georgian parliamentary election, we investigated a case of use of technology when the AI-generated call was made to the OSCE spokesperson to showcase how NGOs are terrorizing the Western observers. I'll show this next example since it concerns Maya Sandu and the recent elections. AI-generated comment was disseminated through the Telegram channel created on behalf of Maya Sandu, calling Georgia the colony of Russia. Actually, the stages of dissemination of this information is quite interesting because it was about the spread of disinformation initially from Moldovan Telegram channels, later amplified by Russian, Moldovan Telegram channels and Georgian government-supported channels with the message Maya Sandu tries to scare their voters with Georgia while Georgia economically is ahead of Moldova, and similar visuals and similar messages were amplified simultaneously through different channels. And finally, we saw comment of Maria Zakharova on AI-generated Sandu's comment. And I'll show another examples about fake observers, which is very curious case, but this also illustration how autocratic regimes are using the fake observers to legitimize elections. We investigated case when the head of funeral bureau from France was invited to observe Georgian elections, claiming on pro-government Georgian media channels that elections in Georgia conducted much better rather than in France. And he visited some cemeteries in Georgia. He has no experience in observing elections, but this is a way how they are mimicking democratic institutions and observers. So I will stop here. There are a lot of slides to show how the Russian actors are trying to demonize and discredit the protests in Georgia, and they bring this Ukrainian trace and try to find Ukrainian trace in this protest besides the Western one, and how they use these false identification methods, meaning the Russian pranks and AI-generated content against the protests against the Western politicians to use their private life against them. So I will stop here, and if you are interested to receive this report, which will be published soon, you can sign up and you can receive it online. So.
Thank you, Tamar, for important insights. We now shift to broader picture. The RSF Propaganda Monitor report provides a closer look at how the Kremlin propaganda operates globally. This presentation will be delivered by Jean Cavalier, head of Eastern Europe and Central Asia Desk, Reporters Without Borders. So Jean, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me for this presentation. So RSF, Reporters Without Borders, is an NGO which defends press freedom and those who embody press freedom, that is journalists, but also an NGO which defends the right for citizens to have access to reliable information. That's why propaganda is one of our main priorities. And this Propaganda Monitor project is our contribution to increase the level of awareness and understanding of the Kremlin's activities. Because to defend trustworthy news, of course, you need to understand how to counter the propaganda tactics and how it works. The Propaganda Monitor project is a website dedicated to exposing the way propaganda, disinformation, manipulation operates. And for over a year, RSF has been documenting individuals, networks, strategies behind the Kremlin propaganda in Russia and internationally with the support of a committee of experts. And we published a report compiling all the contents from the project. It's a bilingual report in English and French, and it is illustrated by cartoonists from the cartoon for Peace, sorry, an NGO. And of course it's available on our website, but I've taken some hard copy here, so those who are very interested can take them after the conference. So to start with the propaganda definition, because it's important, and our definition at RSF is that it's an effort to spread messages or information under the guise of journalistic codes in the service of a political ideology. And to speak about the key informations in this report. So we started this report with the organized repression of journalists and media outlets in Russia. Of course, you know that Putin's regime has gradually taken over control over the media landscape in Russia to impose a single narrative to serve the regime. So the regime stigmatized journalists and media, labeled them as foreign agents, as terrorist, extremist, or undesirable organization. And they use repressive laws to imprison journalists. Actually, we have 49 imprisoned journalists because of their work in Russia, and 26 of them are Ukrainians. So that is the first part, and we focus also on topics of exile. We have the testimony of Elena Kostyuchenko, for instance, who was poisoned in Germany. So they are targeted even in exile. Then another key information in this report is amplified narrative based on disinformation. So we have heard in the previous session the narratives like the Ukrainian Nazis, the Donbass genocide, or the conspiracy theory about biolabs, amplified with different techniques through boats, through the stealing of identity through AI. So we are telling how RSF was also targeting several times with fake videos to using its identity for war propaganda. It can be also TV series as Mariupol, so we have an article about this. The creation of so-called journalism school, which train a generation of propagandists, and so on. Another key element is, of course, the players behind the Russian propaganda. State media, military influencers, foreign propagandists. So we have portraits of different foreign propagandists able to adapt their discourse to different local audience. And networks like the African Initiative, a propaganda agency set up in Africa alongside projects like Africa Corps, or the network called International Reporters. And we've seen also that Moscow has launched a network called the Global Fact-Checking Network, which claims to verify facts, but actually promote the official Russian narrative. So it's also a topic we have investigated in this report. So the fourth key element is the expansion of the Kremlin's network across all continents. We have interviewed some experts on propaganda. In Latin America, for instance, we've seen that RT's presence has been growing in the countries that persecute independent media the most. In Africa, where the Kremlin uses anti-colonialism as an instrument of influence, researcher Maxime Audinet explained that Russia is exploiting the fragility of the local media landscape to hire the influence entrepreneurs or influence contractors paid by the Kremlin. Even in the EU, we revealed that despite the EU sanctions, Sputnik and RT are still available easily in Europe and the internet, and managed to propagate an anti-EU rhetoric. Then another key element to finish with that is, of course, the solutions for stemming propaganda and promoting reliable news, because at RSF we are trying to think about such solution and to contribute. So, of course, the first response is to support independent media to set the record straight. That's why we provide support to them. We encourage, of course, fact-checking initiatives, and another initiative I'd like to speak about, it's the GTI, the Journalism Trust Initiative. It's an international professional standard that helps to verify, to identify, reliable news and to restore trust in news media. Collateral freedom operation is a mean to circumvent censorship through mirror sites we offer to independent media. The Svoboda satellite bouquet, which provides the Russian population equipped with satellite dishes, but also population in Europe, news in Russian, with Russian-speaking reliable TV and radio channels. We have, for instance, the uncensored library in Minecraft, the famous game to target younger audience also, so they have access to articles censored in Russia, for instance. What is also important is legal action against Russian interference. For instance, we waged a legal battle against Eutelsat, which is a satellite operator, to stop the broadcasting of Россия 1, Первый канал, and NTV, and we succeeded. And the last part of the report, at the very end, it's the recommendation of RSF. We have three main recommendations to protect the democratic information spaces, and we talked about already, in a preventive way, of course. The framework, legal framework, has to be very clear. The second recommendation is to make leading online platforms more accountable, beyond the DSR we discussed just before. And last but not least, to support exile journalism with legal protection, economic viability, and in general strengthen their capacities. I just want to finish with the announce of the second season of this project. The Propaganda Monitor project will explore the Chinese propaganda because China is lavishing money on modernizing its international broadcasting apparatus, in investing in foreign media outlets, and inviting journalists from developing countries to train in China. And this is to impose New World Media Order, where journalism is synonymous with state propaganda. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jean, for this very comprehensive overview, but also many thanks to you and to RSF for your work and for supporting our conference as well. And finally, we conclude with a practical resource. The FIMI Toolkit is an evidence-based instrument that supports journalists, researchers, and educators in identifying and responding to influence operation. This will be presented by Marina Hidalgo, Public Policy and Institutional Development Officer at Maltida, Spain. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, again. I'll be very quick with this, but let's start off with these questions that, looking at your faces, now I fear the answers, but the point here is that while we're having these intellectual discussions about FIMI, this is basically how people are feeling, how real people are being impacted by this coordination, by these operations, and also sharing the results that Tamar was talking about how the public is really interpreting those narratives and how they're perceiving, which is sometimes not what we think about because we are more in the side of the story. So this that I'm presenting is in the same project that Tamar was talking about, Safimi, which is about building societal resilience in Georgia specifically. It's coordinated by Maldita, but with MTF, with Transatlantic Foundation, and with Transparency International. And aside from a lot of investigation, this is more on the countering side, and it's basically building a FIMI toolkit, which is a resource that we can share with the broader society in order to have a stronger capacities for a coordinated response, right? So again, FIMI is a very complex phenomenon. It's sometimes very wordy. It feels very political. It's about geopolitical interests, and sometimes when we are using these words, they don't make sense to the general audience, and they don't even make sense to people that are there to protect democracy. Maybe the media is not quite understanding the problem. Civil society, which is heavily targeted by this, is also not quite there with this conversation. So this specific output of the FIMI project is about raising awareness, but also about using clear and very accessible language, and also having into account that this is an evolving phenomenon, and there's not quite a universal agreed standards, but that's why it's been drafted very carefully and looking at all the evidence that it's available, because it's not about creating something new, it's not about reinventing the wheel, but more that it helps as a meta resource and about collecting everything that already exists, many of your inputs, and putting it all together so it's accessible to everyone to understand this digital phenomenon. So it works like this. It all revolves around a main resource that should be understandable for everyone, so the general audience, but at the same time it has these specific resources for media which focus more on methodologies, on tips on how to report, then also different inputs for civil society in order to provide media literacy materials, and these counter narratives that should be explored. And at the same time, we also want to reach educators in order for them to have media literacy and critical thinking into their classrooms. But this is supposed to be very diverse because we want to build this resilience jointly. So this is a bit of an overview of everything that it covers from the basics. So what is FIMI? What are the actors behind? It has a lot of case studies. It builds into the TTPs that we all know, but people don't know about, and the frameworks that are being used for exploring these influence campaigns. And this is a bit of how it looks like. So it does go through the definitions, but it goes through the definitions in a word-by-word way, so to make sure that everyone is understanding what we're dealing with here in order to also be pre-banked on it. It also starts with a lot of historical context, because we cannot pretend that this is a new threat, but at the same time, this allows to understand how online platforms are playing a role here, and a problem that already exists is now massively amplified, right? Again, we are not reinventing more frameworks, but using existing ones that are very much agreed by different organizations. And we are putting them all together into one resource in order to understand them better. But at the same time, there's many infographics that are very good and very dense at the same time, so we take the time to break them down. Thank you to the AIS for these infographics, but we're doing the job of really looking into the steps and to the different parts of them in order to make them easier to understand. And at the same time, this I think is the most important part probably. We are really grounding all these concepts into evidence. So we will speak about TTPs, but we will use real world examples. So we don't get stuck into the intellectual conversation on these behaviors, but we see clearly with the examples that we're all gathering, presenting them to explain this phenomenon. And also, Maldita works a lot on media literacy, and our media literacy team is also testing a lot of activities to also contribute to understanding of FIMI. For example, these activities, it's about trying to identify whether this is FIMI, propaganda, disinformation, but at the same time, you probably don't have the full picture of this, and you don't have all the hints that you would need to make a judgment, but that's basically how it works in real life. Many times you don't have the evidence that you need for having a clear assessment of what you're looking at, but it's about clicking that critical thinking in order to have a common understanding on the issue, trying to coordinate a response that includes everyone in the society in order to be more resilient against this phenomenon. And that's it. Where you can also subscribe to get this FIMI toolkit, which is almost finalized. And I think it's very useful. It is targeted to Georgian society, but we're also trying for it to be as plain as possible in order for it to be scalable as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you to all of you. I hope that researches and toolkit presented today will help to better understand today's pressing informational challenges and to address it. This is all. As much as we want to open session for questions, we don't have time for this. So I suggest to continue the conversation at the reception, maybe with a glass of wine. We warmly invite all of you at the reception and hope we will have very interesting conversation there too. Have a nice evening. Thank you all.